Over the last few years, I've seen dozens of clay.com tutorials on YouTube. Don't get me wrong, there is some solid stuff out there, but this is going to be the first full-length, in-depth course on clay on YouTube on the internet, and it's completely free. I'll be summarizing everything that I learned in the last 2 years of using clay.com every single day to generate over $300,000 for my own business and to help over 1,000 students to learn clay.com completely from scratch to generate thousands of leads and to grow their own businesses. Take GMP, for example, who after implementing the clay systems that we set up for them, within 6 months crossed $300,000 in revenue. Take Asher, for example, who after completing my Unlock Clay course went on to cross $10,000 in monthly recurring revenue, solo implementing clay for clients. We're going to go through everything from what clay actually is, which clay plan you need, what other sales tools you need alongside clay, every important feature and button within clay that you need to know before getting started with using it every day, and even I'm going to be giving away the 3 secret GPTs that can automate 80% of the boring stuff inside of clay.com for you. And yes, I've even saved up some of my energy to talk about how to write better cold emails than 99% of salespeople, how to hyper-personalize every single cold outreach message super cheap inside of clay.com. And yes, I know a lot of you watching this video are probably thinking, why and how can you actually save clay credits, because clay is so expensive. So yes, I'll be giving away my 20 plus tips for you to be saving over $700 in clay credits every single month using the tips that I'm going to provide throughout this video. Now, as we begin the course, it's super important to understand what clay actually is. And for pure oversimplification, I want you to think about clay as the bridge between the inputs and the outputs. As you can see in the image on the screen right now, typically there are 3 things that needs to be present in order for clay to work for you. So the first thing that needs to be present is the inputs. Now, the inputs are the things that we import into a clay table. So super simply put, it typically is either company data, so in other words, lists with different company names and company websites, or it's people data. So in that case, obviously, it's just lead lists that you may get from some providers like Apollo, Lucia, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, LinkedIn Recruiter, or anything of that sort. Or the third type of inputs, which is less common, but is still present sometimes, which is job data. So in other words, you may go to Apify and scrape some job listings from Glassdoor and Indeed, for instance, and you may want to import those into a clay table for whatever reasons. Or you may go to a data aggregator like theirstack.com as well, and you would want to then import that into a clay table. So simply put, yes, you could do all of this stuff and source company, people, and job data inside of clay itself, but it's not as reliable and it's going to cost you a lot more overall to try doing that inside of clay. So you might as well go to your typical provider that you're currently using. And don't worry if you don't have the right providers for these types of data right now, because we'll be touching on those later on in this video as well. If we go inside of a clay table over here, the first thing that you would need to be worried about is how to get data inside of clay. So super simply put, inside of clay, all you have to do is click on import CSV, and you can drag and drop any sort of CSV file, be it a Google Sheet or anything of that sort. So you will just grab it from your downloads folder, upload it here, click on continue, click on new blank table, and complete the import, and voila, within just a couple of seconds, all of this data that you just sourced from another platform will typically be inside of the clay table instantly. Now, worth noting that there are other ways that you can get the data inside of your clay table. This could be done through APIs and webhooks. For the time being, we're staying away from those, but you just need to be aware that it is possible for you to pass the data from other providers directly into clay using APIs and webhooks. So now you know that you need one of those data sources as your input inside of the clay tables. And now the real question is, what the hell can clay actually do with this data? First of all, it can help you to enrich the data. Let's say we imported a list of people that just attended our conference. We may have just their full names and company names. Clay can help us to enrich this data at scale, so it can help us find the websites of every individual lead. It can help us find the email address of each individual lead, and it can also qualify those leads based on the ideal client profile that we provide inside of Clay. This will typically be the enrichment stage, so whereby we have some data fields like full name and company name, but we don't have the website. So by enriching data, we mean getting more data points about each individual company or person or job inside of a list. Moving on, the second thing that Clay can do for us is qualify data. So as we already mentioned just now briefly, you may be importing a list of companies, in which case you want to understand how many employees does a company have? Is their business model B2B, B2C, direct to consumer? Are they in the right geography? Do they have the right level of headcount? And on the basis of this, we can then qualify a company to see if it fits your ideal client profile. And then thirdly, of course, what Clay is most renowned for is its fancy AI features that enable you to personalize every single cold outreach message. And this is something that I'll cover briefly right now, just to walk you through how people really use Clay in order to personalize every single cold outreach message. It's a super quick 5-step process. The first step typically is thinking of what a super personalized email looks like and drafting it. In bold, we have the custom variables. In other words, the dynamic variables that will need to be filled in and personalized for each specific individual that is receiving this template. That's typically the first step, which is completely up to you. You're not doing this inside of Clay. You're just doing it on paper or inside of a Google Doc. And you're just writing down what a super personalized cold email looks like. So you need to think, what's the final output? What's the final message that each individual lead needs to be receiving? And after you do that, you will break down the email into variables. After you break down that email into variables, you will identify the enrichment for each variable. So for instance, inside of this specific email that I just showed you, there are 5 or 6 dynamic variables that we can see over here, like the best-selling item from a company website, the number of website visitors that this company is getting every month, the average order amount on their websites, and a bunch of other personalizations like first name and some of the other things as well. After we map out what dynamic variables we need to find, we need to understand where we get those dynamic variables from. So in other words, what enrichments are we going to use in order to source this data? So after we know what enrichment we will use, a lot of the time we will need a prompt, for instance, for ChatGPT or OpenAI when using that enrichment as well. This is our dream email template that we want to be sending out to each lead. This is how we would go about building it inside of Clay. So we'll have this data all imported over here. We will map out the enrichment step by step. We'll know that step 1 is identifying the best-selling item. Then we'll get the website visitors, then we'll get the estimated order amount, then we'll calculate the untapped revenue, and before we know it, this is the final cold email that will be received by the prospect. And at the very end, when we find all of these dynamic variables in order to fill in the email, all we need to do is click on add column, click on message, and over here we can generate the message. So for instance, hi first name, and we will fill in all of these dynamic variables for each individual lead. So it would look something like this, what you can see on my screen right now, whereby we have the text, which has all been connected using dynamic variables, and this is typically how you would use Clay in order to personalize outreach for each individual lead. And don't worry, because we'll be talking about this later on in the course. Now, let's imagine a hypothetical scenario where by now you already understand the inputs, you understand roughly what Clay can do with the inputs, and now it's a matter of you qualifying, personalizing, and enriching the data, and you have all of this data completely ready. What do you do with this data? What do you do after this Clay table is finished? And typically this is when Clay allows you to send this data into either LinkedIn automation or email automation, whereby you can send those personalized messages via LinkedIn or via emails. Or you may want to create a task inside of your CRM, for instance. You may want to add this data to a database, be it your CRM, your ATS, or you may want to transfer this data using an API or webhook to any other sort of custom platform that you're currently using. A lot of the time, I see Clay being used in order to then notify the sales reps of activity. For example, when as the input, there is a new lead that submits a form on their website, Clay personalizes, enriches, and qualifies the data, and then on the back of that, you can send a notification to your sales reps to follow up with a lead. Now, here is the thing. In order for Clay to work effectively for your business, there is just one thing that you need to ask yourself. And that thing is, every manual step that your team is currently taking can probably be replaced through an enrichment. So for those of you that may not be aware, in the top right-hand corner, when you click on actions, every action is an enrichment. So every single time that you perform an action inside of clay.com, this is called an enrichment. The chances are you now understand what Clay actually is, and it's about time that we talk about which Clay plan you would need when you start implementing Clay. Now, typically there are 3 different pricing options. The most affordable Clay plan is $149 per month, and it gives you access to 2,000 Clay credits, which in my opinion is good enough for you to start playing around inside of Clay, but it's too limited because there's too little Clay credits, and it does not connect Clay with outreach tools. So in other words, let's say you create this killer workflow inside of Clay, you would not be able to straight away directly send this data into an email automation tool or into a LinkedIn automation tool, but instead you will have to manually export that CSV and then go and import it manually into like SmartLead or HeyReach. So realistically, you could start with a $149 plan. It does mean that you would need to plaster and sellotape that part of the process because you would not be able to send this data into other platforms seamlessly. But yes, you can get started with it. It's super, super affordable, but just expect to be doing a lot of manual tasks on the back end. And realistically speaking, if you're serious about implementing Clay, at least you should be considering the $349 plan, which I'll talk about right now. So essentially, with a $349 a month plan, it's great for anyone that wants to use Clay for email or LinkedIn automation, simply because it has that native integrations there. So you can just, with a click of a button, add leads automatically into Instantly, SmartLead, HeyReach, like Growth Machine, Lemlist, or whatever other platform of choice you have when it comes to sending your cold outreach. And it also gives you access to HTTP API, which for the time being, I don't want you to worry about, but it basically is a fancy way of saying that, hey, if you want to connect this to Zapier or any other tool, the chances are you can connect it super fast and you can integrate Clay with any tool in the world pretty much, assuming that you purchase the $349 a month Clay plan. The chances are 99% of you watching this would never need to consider using the $800 a month plan. However, there is one exception. If you want to have a native integration between your CRM system, be it HubSpot, Salesforce, Loxo, or anything of that sort, make sure to head over to clay.com/integrations to make sure that Clay has a native integration with your CRM. In that case, you may need to consider the $800 a month plan. Now, in theory, yes, you can integrate your CRM together with Clay using the HTTP API feature on the $349 a month plan. However, speaking from experience here, this causes a lot of bugs, and I would not wish this upon anyone to be using the HTTP API feature in order to connect the CRM to Clay. So if you're considering doing that, I would very much ask you to reconsider that, especially as you get started with your Clay learning journey. Now, if you do decide to splurge $800 a month on the Pro plan, I very much recommend that you consider getting an implementation partner, be it a Clay expert or an agency like B2B Boosted that I run, for example, simply because the stakes are very high when you're synchronizing your CRM data with Clay, and just one wrong click of a button can cause all of your data to be completely destroyed through Clay. Of course, right now, it will be pretty rude of me to not tell you that you can get 2,000 free Clay credits as soon as you upgrade to a paid Clay plan. If you want to get over 2,000 free Clay credits on me as soon as you upgrade to a paid account, by all means, just use the link which will be down in the description below, so go check it out. By now, I expect for most of you to have chosen which Clay plan you most likely need at this stage of your Clay learning journey. The chances are you probably will start off with a $149 per month plan, and then naturally you will probably most likely end up using the $349 plan every single month going forwards. The next question is, what sales tools do you need to purchase alongside Clay in order for you to be able to pull off all of these fancy Clay workflows? Essentially, this is where I want to introduce you to the 80/20 Clay tech stack, which is the tech stack that I prescribe to all beginners to clay.com, having seen over 1,000 students complete the course in the last 9 months alone. So essentially, let's just start with the basics. The first thing that you would need is to purchase email domains. This is especially the case if you intend on using Clay to do any form of cold outreach, because typically if you're sending an email from your main email domain, for example, tim@google.com, the chances are your email domain reputation will go down because you're naturally sending large volumes of cold outreach. It's not advised to be doing that from your main email account. And for that reason, what I recommend is for you to use a tool like PrimeForge, where you're able to go out there, buy some lookalike domains. For instance, instead of google.com, you may buy trygoogle.com or buy google.com or go google.com. And what this will enable you is to then buy not only the domains, but also more inboxes. And naturally, if you have more inboxes, you can send higher volumes of outreach. And this is why you would basically purchase email domains. Now, secondly, you would need an email warm-up tool, which also will most likely do email automation for you. In this case, I recommend you to use SmartLead. There are a bunch of other people that will also recommend you to use Instantly, Lemlist, La Growth Machine, or anything of that sort. It's up to you to choose. I personally use SmartLead, so I recommend for you guys to use that as well. And the reason for that is simple, because SmartLead will enable you to, first of all, warm up your email domains. Over here, we have all of the email domains that I own, and you can see that on the right-hand side, we can see the warm-up reputation. So SmartLead enables us to warm up the email inboxes. And for those of you that may not be aware, the warm-up process is the process of taking out emails from spam folders, junk folders, and promotions folders, and putting those emails back into the inbox. So simply put, what SmartLead does is it ensures that emails do not land in spam, and also enables us to automate the email outreach at scale so that we can send hundreds of thousands of emails if we want to directly using their platform. Thirdly, you'll probably need an email finder. Yes, inside of Clay, you have a bunch of email finders, but they cost you Clay credits. And later on in the course, I'll talk to you about why Clay credits are really, really expensive. And just for a bit of context, if you're spending money on one Clay enrichment and it costs you one Clay credit, it's 4 cents. So you're basically, every time you're spending one Clay credit, you're throwing out of the window 4 cents every single time. So it's a lot cheaper for you to go and get this email provider directly. So in this case, I recommend for you guys to go and look at Better Contacts, because in my opinion, it's the best email provider out there, simply because it just combines over 20 email providers all into one tool. So that means that the chances are you're going to find the most emails using Better Contact rather than any other email provider out there. On top of that, you would also need an email verification tool. Just for a bit of context, one email verification for one email will cost you 4 cents inside of Clay because it's one Clay credit. However, if you go and use a provider like Zero Bounce, it will cost you a 20th of a cent, for instance. So it's a lot cheaper. It's like 10 to 20 times cheaper for you to go and buy an email verification tool like Zero Bounce. You can just buy one-off credits. They will last you for 3 to 6 months with no problem, and it will be far cheaper than spending Clay credits inside of Clay. So for that reason, I recommend for you to use an email verification provider, which essentially just validates emails for you, making sure that you're not sending emails to email addresses that don't exist or that are completely made up. Now, as you become a power user of Clay.com, you will realize that you're spending 80% of your Clay credits on OpenAI and ChatGPT, because simply put, you're using AI to automate what you would have done manually otherwise. This is when I recommend for you to go out there and get the OpenAI API key. It's super simple. All you need to do is go into Google, type in OpenAI API, and then over here you'll see the API platform. Now, OpenAI API is perfect for functions like Clayagent or just generating text inside of Clay, and it's very, very good for just analytical tasks of doing AI web scraping. So when you tell AI to go visit a website, extract some data and pull it back to you, or it's also really good for just basic AI prompting, like qualifying company lists or people lists. Where it's not good is AI copywriting, because ChatGPT sounds super robotic, and for that reason, you would need to get the Claude API key in order for you to do any sort of AI copywriting. So for this, I very much recommend, very similarly to OpenAI API, you'll just type into Google Claude API, and straight away you could go to Claude developer platform and get yourself an API key. This will maybe cost you $50 a month to use Claude, and maybe another $50 to use OpenAI API. And then finally, this brings us to where you're going to source people data, company data, and or job data from. I cannot answer this question for you just yet, but this will be covered later on in the course, so stay tuned for that. But simply put, you just need to be able to budget to have 1 or 2 other random tools where you can source people, company, and or job data from. Let's just go through the tech stack and evaluate the cost of the tech stack. Email domains maybe will set you back about $30 to $50 per month. SmartLead will set you back maybe $50 to $100 per month. Email finding can be anywhere from $60 to $100 per month on average. Email verification, another $20 per month. OpenAI API, about $50. Claude API key, another $50. Clay, $350. And then people and company data, this really depends, but it could be a couple of $100 in total as well. So one thing to keep in mind is Clay is going to be expensive. Typically, an average Clay user probably spends about $800 up to $1,400 per month on Clay alongside other tools as well. So in my opinion, when implementing Clay or learning Clay, I would very much recommend that you exhaust all the free trials. one thing that I found very useful for myself over the last 2 years was begging every single software provider for an extended free trial. And believe it or not, most of these software providers can extend the free trials up to 90 days. So just message the customer support. Realistically speaking, though, make sure that in the long run, in the next 90 days, you will have the budget of $800 up to $1,000 at least in order to afford this tech stack. Now, there are 4 important disclaimers that I want to talk about when it comes to the tech stack that you likely need when learning Clay as a complete beginner. The first thing is, forget about LinkedIn automation. It's super expensive, regardless of what provider you use, to automate LinkedIn. And in my opinion, it's not worthwhile because LinkedIn typically caps you at sending 20 cold messages per day, 20 connection requests per day, and it's not a large enough volume for you to justify the investment of spending $60 to $70 to $80 for your LinkedIn automation tool of choice. So in my opinion, go big on emails, because emails you can scale infinitely and you can get the most leads using cold email outreach rather than LinkedIn outreach. Now, just a quick note for company and people data. We'll talk about this later on in the video, but as a rule of thumb, if your ICP hangs out on LinkedIn, I would recommend you to use a tool called Apollo, and specifically you can use a tool called Export Apollo to get the data at 1/10 of the price of Apollo itself. So that's typically the first way that you will source the data of anyone, of any leads that hang out on LinkedIn. And then if your ICP is brick and mortar businesses or off the grid type of audiences, you're most likely going to benefit from a tool like Outscraper or OpenMart or some other tool like OceanIO. And don't worry if you've never heard of any of these tools, because I have tutorials on every single one of them, which I'll be giving away to you if you check out the link down in the description below, where we'll have this entire crash course with all the links, all the resources, and everything that I promise to share with you inside of this video. Disclaimer number 3. After a month of building Clay tables, you will find yourself spending a lot of Clay credits on specific enrichments, and this may mean that you may want to buy those sales tools directly, because naturally it will cost you a lot less if you are to purchase the tools directly from the data provider rather than using Clay as the middleman, because of course Clay marks up the price, and that's why each enrichment costs you a specific number of credits so that Clay can fit their own margin there as well. So consider having a tiny bit of buffer budget in mind, so that one day, once you start spending too many Clay credits on specific enrichments, you can go directly to the data provider and just buy the data directly from them. Now, disclaimer number 4. This is one thing that I'm super guilty of over the last 2 years. Don't fall for the shiny object syndrome with sales tools. Just get your MVP, your minimal viable tech stack, and stick to those tools to start with. Just promise yourself that you will give yourself 30 to 60 days with just this tech stack. Don't constantly look at random LinkedIn posts of some random LinkedIn gurus that just introduce a new tool. Don't go and try a bunch of new free trials. Only after that, when you really are craving another tool, and it's a must-have tool, only then spare your focus on using some other free trials for other tools as well, because otherwise you will end up in a constant loop of just learning and relearning new tools, exhausting a bunch of free trials with little results to see for it. So by now, I hope you know what Clay actually is, what sales tools you likely need to buy alongside Clay, and the next question is, what should you actually use Clay for? So luckily for you, I've just created this page with a bunch of sales and marketing use cases, which I'll be giving away right underneath the video. The link will be down in the description below. And in the meantime, I'll just walk you through every single use case that I've found that is beginner friendly, that 99% of companies can start off with when implementing Clay in-house. So first of all, we have the most obvious one, which is personalized email and LinkedIn outreach, which we'll be talking about later on inside of this course. But simply put, all it is you will have company lists, people lists, job data. On that basis, you will eventually find leads that fit your ideal client profile. You will research a bunch of personalized and relevant things about the company and about the person, and you will send them personalized emails. This will typically be a lot more automated and a lot faster than you doing this manually otherwise, and the level of personalization can be absolutely crazy. So that's the first use case, which is the most common and the most obvious. Moving on top of that, we have data enrichment. In this case, I'm sure a lot of the time, if you look at your CRM right now, you will have missing phone numbers, missing LinkedIn profiles, missing email addresses. maybe you've attended some conferences or some webinars where you have a list of people that attended them as well. Chances are you probably want to enrich that data, you want to validate the emails and make sure that they're up to date and that they're refreshed. In that case, data enrichment is a super boring use case. However, you can pull that off pretty simply inside of Clay by the end of watching this course. Moving on, we have a bunch of marketing automations. This really depends on what kind of service or product you're selling, but a lot of the time, if you import your existing customer data, you can then infer on the basis of their past purchases or cart additions or anything of that sort. You can then personalize the offers that you send out to them. Moving on, lead qualification is a really obvious one. You can just trigger the lead qualification with the input of the full names of people or, for example, the company websites, and you can then qualify companies and people based on different things like the company headcount, the industry, the geography, and so on. More than that, you may choose to use Clay for syncing your CRM and synchronizing your CRM contacts. In this case, you may check if CRM contacts have switched companies. You may want to validate the emails of people that already exist in your CRM. You may want to research your target accounts better. You may want to refresh your CRM with real-time data so that the sales team does not rely on historic data, which has been sat inside of the CRM completely outdated and stale for a while. And this is the most likely use case for the bigger companies that are looking to synchronize and tidy up their CRM alongside Clay. We talked about outbound workflows, which I wouldn't talk about too much. You can also funnel any inbound traffic, be it from your website, your ads, or anything of that sort. You can automatically set it up so that it populates a Clay table, and then Clay can run automatically to qualify and enrich all of those leads that are coming in, be it from your website, your Google Ads campaigns, or anything of that sort. We can also use Clay for candidate sourcing and HR, and I've got a bunch of other videos that I will make sure to link in the resources that I'm giving away underneath the video, which will walk you through how to use Clay for auto-qualifying and reaching out to candidates at scale using personalized messages. A lot of the time, when you get an influx of people applying for an open role that you've just listed, you can just pull them all into a Clay table, qualify them using Clayagent and OpenAI, and on the basis of that, you can see who's the best fit for a role. On top of that, account-based research is a really boring one, but you can go through scoring accounts based on buying intent, sales triggers, and key business insights, for instance, fundraising news or anything of that sort. So you can just monitor those and do some research about an existing company hit list of yours. So for instance, for an existing company hit list of yours, you can do all of this research to find out everything about the buying intents, the sales triggers, and any sort of key business insights that you typically would research manually otherwise. After you pin down those exact tasks, you can then figure out a use case around it. As an example, let's say my sales team right now is spending a lot of time researching leads before having sales calls with them. Then naturally, a very low-hanging fruit use case for your company, for Clay.com, will be something like creating this type of table, whereby every single time the new meeting gets booked, it automatically populates this table. We scrape the website, we find out the company description, we see what business model the company is using, whether it's B2B or B2C. We understand the target industries for the company, like what are the ICP industries that the company sells to, what are the pain points that the company solves, and all of this other research that typically will be done manually otherwise. So essentially, this is just to say to you that there are endless use cases. As Clay says themselves, the only limitation of what Clay can do is your personal creativity. One disclaimer on that, do not fall for the LinkedIn posts that tell you specific use cases that generate a lot of revenue, because 99% of the times, these are the kind of clickbait posts that are just trying to get your attention. So don't just create random workflows. Don't just copy and duplicate other people's Clay tables, because the chances are they would not work for your business. Now, if you're a total beginner to Clay, the chances are you're craving for me to finally show you every single important feature and button inside of Clay.com, so that next time that you log inside of Clay, you don't feel completely lost, but rather you're in total control. You know what you're doing, you know what buttons you need to press in order to build out that Clay table that you were putting off for the last few months. All you need to do is head over to Clay.com, your screen will look something like this, and immediately on the right hand side you will see this blue button that says New. Over here we have two different things that we can create. We can either create a folder, but in this case, you don't really need a folder because you would not have any Clay tables built just yet. Or you can choose to create a workbook. A workbook is the thing that stores Clay tables inside of it. And over here, give it a name. So in this case, I'll call it Tim's video. So just to keep it super, super simple, this entire thing that we've just created is called a workbook. Think of it as a Google Sheet, like a spreadsheet, like an Excel sheet. Within this spreadsheet, we create separate tables. And the way we'll do that is by clicking on Add at the bottom of the screen here. and then clicking on blank table straight away. You can also click on the toggle at the bottom of the screen here and then click on rename in order to rename the tables. I very much recommend for you to label them to perfection. So you will label it table 1, people data, table 2, company data, and so on. So in this case, I'm just going to call this table 1, company data. Okay, so this looks super depressing. Let's be real here. All you can see is a blank screen, and over here we have 2 main buttons that we will be pressing. The first button we'll be pressing is actions, the button in the top right hand corner. As I mentioned, every action is basically an enrichment. And then more than that, over here, you can see the add column option, and you will have the option of adding different types of columns. So for instance, if you click on URL, you'll be adding a URL column. You can then click on it and rename the column, for instance, to website, and over here you can populate the website really quickly. So for example, let's say we have over here the full name and the website of a specific individual. We can then type in find work email, and straight away it will come up with a bunch of different enrichments that may be appropriate here in order to find the exact email. Worth noting, whenever you click on a specific enrichment, it will always ask you to map the columns, and this is because in order for any enrichment to run, you need to have the right inputs. So in other words, it will tell you, hey, first of all, we need the full name. So you will need to select the full name column, and they will tell you they need the company domain. And obviously the company domain is just the website. So we will map the website here as well. And over here, you can click on save and don't run. The reason that we click on save and don't run is because we don't want to spend any clay credits. And this is specifically important if you have multiple rows in a table. So after you do that, you can now just click on play for one individual row, and this will run for just one row without running for the other rows as well. Now, in this case, it tells us missing input, and it tells us the full name is blank. And this is a very common mistake that a lot of newbies will make inside of Clay. And over here, if we click on the full name, we can see it says Tim Jakobsen over here, so it does look like a full name. However, if we click on the column header, you can see that this is a URL column, so we need to change that to text over here. And every time that it gives you this type of error, you just make sure that it's the right kind of column type. So if you scroll down to text, it'll tell you the exact column type here, and straight away you're then able to find the email address. Let's assume that once again we click on blank table over here and we have no data inside of the Clay table. As I mentioned already, you can click on actions, you can click on sources, and you can click on import from CSV, and this way you're able to import any CSV data, be it from your CRM, your ATS, or anything of that sort. So all we're doing here is we're drag and dropping the data as I showed you earlier in the video. We're then clicking on continue. And over here, typically, if you have some columns that are created already, you may want to map it to a specific column, or if not, you can just click on adding all of those leads in, click on add to table, and always click, whenever you're importing any sort of data, never click save and run rows. Always click on save and don't run, because this will mean that we're not spending any Clay credits by just importing the data into the table. And immediately, one thing as a complete beginner to Clay that I would recommend for you is to always make sure that you deduplicate the data, because as you can see on my screen right now, we have in row number 11 and in row number 12, we have the same contacts details. So if we ever want to deduplicate the data so that we don't use Clay credits to action this data twice, what we need to do is just click on the column, click on dedupe, and over here it will tell us all the duplicates. We can select all the duplicates and delete the duplicate rows. Now, if you want to avoid having any duplicated data inside of the Clay table forever, all you need to do is click in the bottom right hand corner on the settings icon, and then over here, you will see the option of auto deduplicating rows. So if you switch on that toggle, you can select a specific column. So for example, the LinkedIn person profile URL. And this will mean that if you ever try to import a duplicate contact into this list ever again, it will never enable you to do that, because as you can see over here, I've just added the contact and it automatically gets deleted, because this is one of the ways that we can save Clay credits by clicking on the settings icon at the bottom of the table and making sure that auto deduping rows is enabled. It's time to challenge you inside of Clay. So now we're going to do 3 things that you would not have imagined that you would know how to do by the end of this video. The first thing is we're going to show you how to find companies inside of Clay.com. The second thing is how to find jobs inside of Clay.com. And the third thing is how to find people inside of clay.com. So for the purpose of the first option, we're going to just click on add at the bottom over here. We're going to click on blank table. And as soon as we have a blank table, we're going to just type in find companies, and we will see the top enrichment over here. It does not cost us any clay credits. However, as I mentioned earlier in the video, it does give you lower accuracy and lower quality data than other data sources like Apollo or LinkedIn Sales Navigator. But essentially all we need to do here is click on find companies. If you want to add it to your favorites so that it's easy to access next time, you can add a star over here. And all we're doing is clicking on finding companies, and we're then filtering for the companies that we want to create a list with. So in this case, it's completely up to you. You can create your own list of companies. So let's do that together. So you may select specific industries or specific types of companies. You can select a specific headcount for companies as well. You can also filter for the revenue of the company. And once again, I'm sure you used these types of static filters before in other databases like Apollo. So I would just leave you. I will assume that you can do this for yourself. And at the bottom, you can limit the results. So let's say we just do 1,000 rows with this type of data. And after we filter for these types of companies, you can click on continue and import to a new table. This is typically how you find companies inside of clay.com. Make sure after you find the companies, you click on the toggle, you rename it. And now I can rename this to table 1. As a next step, as I promised you already, we're now going to find jobs that these companies are hiring for. So the way we'll do that is we'll click on actions, we'll type in find jobs. And over here, we can see once again, it doesn't cost us any clay credits. You can star this for future reference. You can click on that and you can select the job titles of people that you want to find working at those companies. In this case, I'm just going to find owner, founder, sales, growth, or lead, or director, because I just want to go for a generic people search. And over here, you can see that it found a bunch of people where we can just continue and import this into a new table. Once again, click on the toggle, click on rename, and now we can type in table 2, and then we can say jobs. As a third step, the third type of data that you may want to use inside of clay.com, as I mentioned at the start of the video, is people data. So in order for us to do that, we can click on actions, we can type in find people, and we'll see this find people enrichment, which once again does not cost us any clay credits. So you can treat yourself to that today. And all you need to do is click on that, select the job title, and this is the people that we want to be reaching out to. So let's say we want to reach out to sales, CEO, chief, and then you can click on continue and import to a new table. Of course, after you have all of this data, you can then click on rename. You can title this table 3 people data. Now I'm going to introduce you to this thing called formulas inside of Clay. And a lot of the time when you're inside of Clay, let's say you have the first name and the last name, but you want to combine it together. So you have the full name of the people. Typically, all you need to do is click on add column, select formula, and over here you can just use the backslash just to refer to the column, and then you can just basically put it in that order. So you can say first name, last name, click on generate formula. Straight away, it will basically give you the output here. So it shows you the output on the right-hand side. So it shows that Tim Jakobsen separately becomes Tim Jakobsen together. You can click on output is correct, say formula, and voila, you've just created the full name using formula. You can be conversational with formula as well. So you can say something like turn first name, last name into full name, and then you can click on generate formula. So in this case, it picks up on this and it can actually turn this into the output that you desire. Just make sure to select the columns correctly. Now, let's imagine we have some data that's inside of table 4 over here, and we want to write it into table 5. The way that we typically will move data from one table into another is by clicking on actions in the top right-hand corner and typing in write to other. And over here, we'll select the write to other table. Once again, it doesn't cost us any clay credits, so we can click on that. We can select a table where we want to put this data into. So I'm going to select table 5. I'm going to click on select table. And now over here, you have the option of manually adding the fields that you want to be sent from table 4 into table 5. So I'm going to select the first name and the full name as an example. Inside of the other table, we don't have any columns created yet. So I'm just going to click on new column here and then new column here. And basically, it's just then a matter of saving and running the rows. You should be able to see that it says created 1 records in the other table. So over here, we can head over to the other table and we can see that the full name has been created. Of course, later down the line, we can then rename this and just call this, or we can rename the columns. But this is very important for you to know that if you are trying to move data from one table to another, all you need to do is type in write to other table. But what happens if right now we have the first name and the full name, but we still want to grab another field like the website from the previous Clay table? All we would need to do is click on actions and type in lookup multiple rows, and straight away underneath it will give you the free enrichment, which is to look up multiple rows in other table. We can then select the table that we want to search for. That's why I recommend that you label these tables to perfection, because in cases like this, you need to remember what you call this clay table so that you can just refer to it straight away. And in this case, we just need to find a common column to identify the exact row in the table. So in this case, we're saying, okay, I want to make sure that in that table, the full name contains the exact full name that I've got over here. And then if we click on save and run one row, what this will do for us is within just a couple of seconds, it will give us all the information about the contact from the other table. Now, very briefly, let's talk about how you can use clay to normalize data. So a lot of the time you would import data like the company name and the full name, as you can see inside of my clay table right now. However, a lot of the time the company name could be way too formal. For example, it could be something like B2B Boosted Limited INC, which is obviously not a conversational enough way to name drop the company in an email. And also a lot of the time you may want to relax the full name from Alexander to Alex, for instance. So the way that you will do that is you typically will import the data into a clay table, and then you can click on actions in the top right hand corner and you can just type in normalize, and it will give you the option to normalize the company name. So you can just give it the normal company name there, click on save and run one row, and straight away this enrichment completely for free without costing you any clay credits. It will turn B2B Boosted Limited INC into B2B Boosted Limited as an example, right? If you want to further normalize this, I'll also make sure to include all of my prompts for cleaning up company and people data inside of clay.com, but there are a lot of better ways to do this as well. So for example, if you're looking to normalize a website and it looks something like this, where it's got the HTTPS at the very start, once again, you can just type into the actions in the top right corner, normalize a domain, sure that it isolates the domain, and then you can continue to add fields. Make sure that this one is visible because you want to see it after it's cleaned. Save and run the row. And within just a couple of seconds, this domain, completely for free without costing you any clay credits, will be tidied up as well. Similarly, we have very similar enrichments in order to clean up the first name of the person, for instance, which I wouldn't talk about too much for the time being. But it's just worth noting that there are a lot of free enrichments inside of clay.com that help you to normalize the data so that things like company names, domains, and full names can be cleaned up before you reach out to prospects. Okay, now let me show you the most common enrichment that you'll be using 90% of the time inside of Clay, and that enrichment is called OpenAI. So all you would do is click on actions over here, type in OpenAI, and it should come up over here in the form of two different enrichments. So the first enrichment is the generate text enrichment. The second enrichment is the Clayagent enrichment. So if we use Clayagent for the time being, all we need to do is click on the enrichment itself. And over here, you have the option of getting Clay to help you with generating the prompts. And by the way, don't worry if this sounds confusing already, because I've got a separate part of this video where we'll talk about how to prompt correctly inside of Clay. But simply put, let's say, as an example, right now, we have the full name of a person, but we don't have the LinkedIn profile of a person. All we'll have to do is say, find the LinkedIn profile of, and then we'll use the backslash to refer to the column of the person's full name. Or for instance, if we just want to input just the first name, we'll obviously select the column including the first name of the person. So in this case, all we're saying is find the LinkedIn profile of the person and output just the LinkedIn profile and nothing else. After that, we can click on generate, and this will enable Clayagent to generate this prompt for us, because Clayagent will basically recreate this prompt. It will write it in a longer format so that AI has no excuse to not perform this task correctly. So you can see over here, basically Clayagent creates this entire prompt for us. It will be really, really long if we were to do it manually, otherwise ourselves. We can always switch the model at the top over here, because as you can see, Clayagent has access to the internet and it can scrape and analyze any websites out there. But one thing to keep in mind is this model is costing us 2 Clay credits, but 99% of the time you can just trust GPT 4.0 mini, which will cost you 1 Clay credit. For the purpose of this, I'm going to switch it to GPT 4.0 mini. The Clayagent enrichment, as we talked about earlier in the video, we can add our own API key, which you can see over here that I've selected. And the way that you would add your own API key is by clicking on manage accounts. And inside of Clay, as you can see on my screen right now, you can click on add connection and just copy and paste your API key directly over here. And then click on this toggle, which sets this API key to be your default API inside of Clay. After you're done with that, all you need to do is click on save and run one row in this view. And this will automatically get this AI researcher called Claygens to go and find you the LinkedIn profile of the individual. So you can see the LinkedIn profile over here, and it costed us like a 20th of a cent, which is far cheaper than using Clay credits directly. Worth noting over here, we may want to reformat the output to a URL format, but it's just useful to know that Claygens exists. It can perform any sort of manual tasks for us, be it visiting a website, interpreting data, scraping data, finding us LinkedIn profiles, or anything in between that you typically do manually otherwise. Let's click on the Actions button again. Another really common enrichment is ChatGPT. So in this case, if we click on ChatGPT generate text over here, we can also feed it some information, and we can say something like, the input is the full name of a person, find me the first name of the person only, right? So then all we need to do is just give it the input, which is the full name, and then it can find us the first name of the person. Once again, I don't know why you would want to do that, but this is just an example of how it works. You basically need to tell it what you want to be done. You need to give it an input, and then you can save and run the rows, and it will automatically be able to find you the first name of an individual based on that. And you can see it doesn't cost us hardly any money at all to do that. Now that we've used a bit of Claygens, a bit of ChatGPT, I just want to show you a couple of other hidden features inside of Clay, one of which, especially when you're working on a big Clay table, is the ability to pin certain columns. So all you need to do is click on the column, click on pin, and it will automatically pin it for you, so that whenever you scroll across the screen, that column is frozen and pinned for you. As you use Clay more and more, typically you would want to reuse your enrichments. So one thing that I recommend is every time that you generate a specific prompt inside of Clay, make sure to click on templates at the top, click on save as template, give it a name over here. And then next time, whenever you're looking to use a new Clay template, all we would need to do is just type in the name of the template here, and you would see a bunch of different templates at the bottom over here that we've used before. And if you click on the template section in the enrichments, as you can see on my screen right now, you will have hundreds of different templates you've used historically in the past, which you can use super, super fast for yourself. Now, when you have a large amount of data in front of you, you can basically click on the play button and run the entire column. It will give you the option to run just the first 10 rows or to run all of the rows inside of the table. I very much recommend that you click on play first of all to just see how 2 or 3 rows plan out, because most of the time this will cost you Clay credits. And then afterwards, you can just, when you're happy with it, you can then click on run column, and you will have the option to either force run all of the rows, as you can see in the middle of my screen right now over here, or 99% of the time you need to just click on run all rows that haven't run or have errors, because this will cost you a lot less Clay credits than just force rerunning all the individual rows. So just to give you a bit of an explanation on that, whenever you have an enrichment that looks good to you and you want to run your entire lead list through that enrichment, make sure to click on the column, click on run column, and then just either click on choose number of rows to run, in which case you can choose to run, let's say, 100 rows starting from row 1. Or alternatively, if you back yourself 100% and you just want it over and done with, just click on run all rows that haven't run or have errors, and this will basically trigger the running of the table, but hardly ever should you ever click on force run all the rows. So it's always between this button and the button right underneath it, not force running all the rows. Another thing to keep in mind is this feature called filters inside of Clay. So if we can see the locations, for example, over here, we can see a couple of the leads are based out of the United States. A couple of them are based out of the United Kingdom. So in order for us to be able to filter for the right kind of leads, we can just click on no filters over here, select the column. Here we can select the column for the location, for example, and we can say location contains any off, and we can type in United States. This will apply the filter to narrow down to every single lead in this lead list that is based out of this specific location. More than that, if you want to take this a step further, you can click on the default view icon in the top left-hand corner. You can click on duplicate view. And over here, if you double tap into it, you can give it a name, for example, US only. Now, what this means is this view is for any companies or any people that are based out of the US. And if you duplicate this again, and if you click on the view again and click on duplicate view and go to the filters, you can now filter this for, let's say, Kingdom, because the chances are this will stand for United Kingdom, in which case you have 1.5k leads that are based out of the United Kingdom. And you can double tap into the view in the top left-hand corner and call this UK only. And you can batch those filters one on top of the other. So for example, you can have the location to be United Kingdom, and you can filter on top of that for the job title to contain any of, for example, chief. And this will give you every single C-level person that's based out of the UK. Alternatively, you can add an or condition, which will mean that it's either they have a C-level title or they live in the UK. And you also can click on sort over here if you want to sort based on, for example, the first names of people to be in an alphabetical order. Let's say you get to the end of the clay table and you want to finally send all of this data into an email automation tool of choice, for example. How would you pull this off? Simply put, all you need to do is click on actions, type in the tool that you want to add the leads into. So for instance, this can be Smart Lead. You will select the relevant enrichment, in which case we'll be adding the lead to a campaign. You can select the campaign that you want to send them to. So for instance, I'm just going to send them into the recruiters campaign. For that, you typically would need to have the email address of the person, all of the other information, and the actual emails that you're sending out to the leads will have to be done via the custom fields over here. So you can type in email one over here and use the backslash to refer to the email that you want to be sending them, and then clicking on save and don't run. And for those of you that may have missed this early in the video, let's say we want to send every single one of these people the same email. All we need to do is click on add column, click on message, and over here we can generate the message by just using the backslash to refer to the person's first name. So hi first name. Let's say we'd say something like, what's your 5-kilometer PB as an example. And then over here, I'm going to click on save. This is just like a test example of an email that we want to be sending out. And then inside of this enrichment of adding the leads to campaign, all we need to do is just replace email one over here will be just the name of that. And on the right, we can use the backslash to refer to the body of the email, which will be, hey, what's your 5-kilometer PB? And then after that, you can just save and run 10 rows, for example, and then this will automatically push the leads into your email automation campaign. Very similar, it works the same way if you're putting people into LinkedIn automation, be it HeyReach or any other tool where you can just select that and you can click on that. And worth noting as well, with all of these enrichments, you can save that as a template so that you only add leads to that campaign once. And then after that, next time you have a bunch of these campaigns set up for you so that you can basically just use those templates without you having to manually configure every single button when setting up the campaign. To not overwhelm you too much, I'm going to show you where you can generate a webhook link. But for the time being, I don't want you to worry about what webhooks are. Should you ever be in a position that you need your webhook URL from a clay table, all you need to do is click on actions in the top right hand corner, type in webhook, and over here you will see webhook source. You can click on that, click on import and run. Automatically, it will generate this URL link for you, and this is your webhook, which you can copy and paste into any other platform. And for those of you that may be new to this, what happens is, let's say you go to Apollo. Inside of Apollo, you can add this data to arrive into this URL, and basically the data will be automatically sent over to this URL inside of the clay table. Wherever you're sourcing the data from, you may want to give them the link of this webhook so that it automatically populates this clay table after like a form submission or after a lead list gets generated or something of that sort. All right, one final thing when it comes to just understanding the features and buttons inside of Clay. If you click on actions in the top right-hand corner, and if you type in HTTP API, you will notice this feature over here, which enables you to basically connect to any external APIs. So in this case, it's relatively advanced. I would not recommend you trying to have a go at this unless you've got some sort of software engineering background for the time being. But worry not, if you ever do need to use HTTP APIs, what you can rely on is clicking on Browse Templates, and it will show you all the different public templates that people have set up over time in order to pull data from other platforms. So for example, if you want to set up a specific tool over here, all you need to do is just select, let's say, send contact as an enrichment, fill this in with the right columns. So you need to fill in like the work email, first name, last name, and so on. And then after that, you will set up the entire enrichment for you. Now, the idea behind this part of the video was not to overwhelm you with hundreds of different features and buttons, but rather it was just to show you every single individual button that you likely will be using on a daily basis if you are to implement Clay for yourself or for your clients. So if you have any questions on that, feel free to drop a comment down below. I'll be more than happy to address any of your concerns or any sort of questions or any sort of features that we may not have covered just yet. But I do believe that 90% of the buttons that you'll be clicking on a daily basis have been covered over the last 10 minutes or so. One thing that will save you a lot of time inside of clay.com is the use of custom GPTs. And for those of you that may be wondering, what the hell is a custom GPT? It is simply a GPT inside of OpenAI that has been trained on all the information publicly available about clay.com. And simply put, you can message it similarly to how you would message myself or a friend of yours, and you will get an instant reply to any of your questions related to Clay. Assuming that you have a ChatGPT subscription, which I believe costs $20 per month, all you need to do is head over into your OpenAI account. It will look something like this, and inside of your account, you can click on GPTs, and underneath click on Explore, right in front of you over here where it says Search GPTs, and you can type in the names of the GPTs that I'm about to share with you. And of course, let's talk about custom GPT number 1. This is my go-to GPT to ask any questions about people lists, company lists, job data, anything to do with triggers, sales signals, copywriting, and everything in between. So let me just click on it straight away and I'll walk you through what you can expect. First of all, this GPT, spoiler alert, is called the Unlock Clay GPT. It's totally free and accessible to anyone that has a paid OpenAI subscription. Over here, it summarizes everything that this custom GPT can do for you. So first of all, you can ask a question about cold email copywriting, so you can create email templates for you. It'll be a solid 7 out of 10 email template to start with. Of course, you can just chat to it for a bit longer and it will help you nail personalization and push your email up to be an 8 out of 10. In other words, to be very well written. Secondly, it can also provide you some sales triggers and some ideas for how you can find sales triggers. It can also help you understand what tools you should be using aside from Clay or inside of Clay. So for example, if you're wanting to build a company list, it'll tell you what tools you could use in order to scrape that company list from a specific website. Similarly, it also knows where you can get people data from. So it's trained on different databases like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, Apollo, Lucia, and all of those ones. So it'll be suggesting where you can get people data from. And it also knows every single form of web scraping that I know, because guess what? Spoiler alert, I update this custom GPT on a pretty much weekly basis right now with new insights, with new videos that I produce to help people like you to be more successful inside of clay.com as a beginner. And of course, the main reason for me releasing this GPT is because I've got over 500 students inside of our Unlock Clay community, which means that I have a lot of people asking me questions about Clay. And every time that I find a new type of questions that I'm being asked, I tend to put the answers into this GPT. So it is easily accessible and you don't need to wait until 3 p.m. for me to reply to your messages. So this is the idea behind this. And if I just give you a quick example of how this works, all I can do with this Unlock Clay GPT is basically just ask it a question. For instance, let's say we're selling into restaurants. All I'm going to do here is say, we are selling a payment terminal to restaurants. It charges just 0.05% per transaction, much cheaper than Stripe at 3%. For example, there's just like a totally hypothetical example here. And then after that, I can just say, write a 3-email personalized sequence and tell me where I can source restaurants. And essentially, after you give it this much information, this custom GPT will tell you exactly what I would have told you otherwise. And in this case, it tells you, hey, you can use Outscraper to scrape local restaurants directly from Google Maps. More than that, it doesn't just answer this question, because a lot of custom GPTs are trained to answer you questions. That's not good enough. It goes a step further. It even gives you a video. Over here, it also redirects you to a specific video that I've made in the past about how you can use this specific tool to achieve that exact result that you want to achieve. So in this case, you ask to scrape restaurant data, and guess what? It shows you how to use this tool called Outscraper to scrape restaurants. It also gives you bonus credits, free trial extensions, any sorts of discount codes that I've found and I negotiated with the founders of all of these tools. And more than that, it also gives you alternatives. If for whatever reason the first sales tool is too expensive or it doesn't make sense for you, guess what? There are going to be 2 other recommendations at the bottom here. Once again, gives you a separate video. More than that, at the bottom over here, you basically create a 3-email sequence. It's been pre-trained on over 90 different copywriting templates from some of the thought leaders in the cold email copywriting space. So in this case, case, you can see email 1 says, "Hi, first name, saw you're still running payments through Stripe at 3% per swipe. We offer a payment terminal for just 0.5. That's 60 times cheaper for a place doing $1 million a year in car payments. That's 29,500 in pure savings, worth looking into." And then basically, you can also help you with personalizations and stuff as well. But for the time being, it gives you sales triggers as well. So it gives you the exact sales triggers that you could be considering, why these sales triggers could be relevant, where you can find those sales triggers, the kind of hook that you can use, and then the prompts that you may want to use in order to find that inside of clay.com. So for that reason, if you want a quick feedback loop, by all means, try out Unlock Clay GPT. And let's move into the next part. Here is custom GPT number 2 that you should be aware of. This one is my secret GPT I've just released to the public. And what it does is enables you to input a personalized email. And as soon as you input a personalized email, it will help you generate it through just 2 prompts inside of clay.com. So we'll cover this later on in the video. Don't worry about it for now, but just rest assured that assuming that you know how to write a personalized email, this thing will teach you how you can pull off this email personalization inside of clay.com in 2 quick steps, in 2 quick enrichments. GPT number 3, which is one of my favorite GPTs to ask any questions about Clay's enrichments and integrations. So in other words, if you ever feel confused or lost or overwhelmed inside of Clay, you don't know what enrichment you should be using, just click on the Clay GPT, and inside of the Clay GPT, you can simply ask it a question. So for instance, you can give it a bit of context and say something like, "I want to find the name of a decision maker at a company. What enrichment should I use?" In this case, straight away, it just gives you an answer telling you, hey, just use the find people enrichment, and guess what? It's 100% correct, because what you can do after doing this kind of thing is you can go into a Clay table and just type in the name of that enrichment. And in fact, this is literally right in front of me over here, where you can click on find people on my screen. Alternatively, if you just want to start a Clay table completely from scratch, once again, you could follow their advice and just type in find people, and voila, over here, you have that exact enrichment that the custom GPT just suggested for us. So for that reason, this one of my favorite GPTs. I think you should 100% be using it. The time has come for us to talk about every single way that you can possibly scrape or source data in order to power your Clay tables. Tool number 1, this tool is called Apify. You probably heard of it before. It's the gateway drug into the world of web scraping. The reason for that is, if you go on the Apify website, you can see that it's got multiple actors. So the actors are pre-built scrapers that you can intuitively use. I've done a separate video on how you can use Apify actors, but simply put, you can go on apify.com and see that they scrape TikTok, Instagram, individual job boards like Indeed, Glassdoor, and everything of that sort, and they have a native integration with Clay. So if you're looking to scrape social media, or you're looking to scrape Indeed or Glassdoor or one of those job boards, 99% of the time you're better off starting with Apify and then looking at other options. In number 2, we have this tool called Phantom Buster, which is almost as popular as Apify.com, I believe. And for context, it's like the Swiss Army knife of web scraping. Simply put, you can scrape Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, GitHub, Google Maps, you name it, they can probably scrape it. Now, one thing to keep in mind with all of these scraping tools is you need to never share your personal browsing cookies, because whenever you do share your browsing cookies, that means that these scraping tools can automatically scrape a lot of data, and sometimes as soon as the platform like LinkedIn detects that you're scraping their information, you will naturally just freeze or block your account. So for the purpose of this one, I would say Phantom Buster is useful, but one of the downsides that I find with Phantom Buster is a lot of the time you would need to provide it your own proxy or your own browsing cookies, which in my opinion, it just does not make it worthwhile. So for that reason, you may want to consider other options. In number 3, we now have Scrapely. And if you're looking for some inspiration about how you can go about competitor retargeting, in other words, you have this competitor that has your ideal clients following them or engaging with their posts, or you just want to know who follows your competitors, you can basically just get an up-to-date list of your competitors' followers on Scrapely.io. Some of the most popular campaigns that my agency has been running over the last 2 years have come from this data. So once again, I've never been paid by these guys, but I love their data. And trust me when I say this, I spend anywhere from $500 to $2,000 a month just buying followers of competitors. So if you want to go after someone else's existing audience, I think Scrapely is a good option for that. Now, moving on, in number 4, we can scrape people that like a specific post or engage with a specific post. This is one of many functionalities of this tool called HeyReach that we may have touched on earlier in the crash course already. But simply put, if you want to scrape every single person that likes or engages with a specific post, all you need to do is head over into your HeyReach account, head over to the leads section, click on add leads, and you'll have this option of LinkedIn post reactors. And if you click on continue over here, you should be able to basically add a LinkedIn post URL. And on that basis, as soon as you add the URL of the LinkedIn post, you'll automatically start scraping a list of people that either engage with this post by liking or commenting on it, which once again is a very niche use case for this LinkedIn automation tool, but once again is worth knowing. Now, in number 5, we have Zenrose. Zenrose is one of my favorite tools to use for extracting very specific data, for example, scraping Zoom info built with Crunchbase, PitchBook, LinkedIn Ad Library, Apollo, Glassdoor, Capterra, YouTube. You can scrape pretty much anything using the Zenrose enrichment. And guess what? If right now you're watching this and you're thinking like, oh, how do I use Zenrose? Over here, as soon as you ask to unlock Clay GPT, I know I've mentioned this a few times, but all I'm going to do is type in how to use Zenrose. It'll redirect me to a video over here of how I can use this tool. So I think this is the best use of time right now to just walk you through all the different options. Moving to number 6, here we have SerperDev. SerperDev is the world's fastest and cheapest way to scrape Google searches and Google data. So simply put, if you're looking to scrape Google Maps locations, or if you're looking to scrape Google searches, for instance, to find the LinkedIn profile of a person, then by all means, SerperDev could be the best option here. SerperDev is super, super powerful. You can see I've made a video on SerperDev before over here, which has over 1,000 people that viewed it in the last 9 months alone. So go check it out if you want to learn how to use it. But essentially, it's super, super cool for scraping Google Maps or scraping any Google searches. So if you're looking to find details about a company's fundraising or something of that sort, that could be really, really useful. And it's a fraction of the price of any other scraping method. However, the downside is SerperDev is only available at the time of me recording this on the $349 a month plan inside of Clay.com. So kind of sucks if you're not on that plan or a more pricey plan with Clay already. Now we'll skip number 7 because number 7 was Timify. The idea behind it was to put 10 job boards into one. However, unfortunately, because I didn't have the time to work on this too much, we reached a couple of thousand in revenue, but I just decided to not continue with that project. And that was a software project that I launched on the side over the last year or so. Didn't quite work out. I've still got it on this list. I do apologize, but let's just skip through that. In number 8, we have Prospeo, and Prospeo enables you to scrape LinkedIn Sales Navigator. So let me show you how we can go about doing this. First of all, needless to say, we need to download the Prospeo Chrome extension, which you can see over here pinned on my side. And then as soon as I have a specific filter applied inside of my Sales Navigator search, for example, I'm looking for founders over here, I can just click on export with Prospeo. This will pop up automatically. We don't really need to do anything. In fact, I believe this is available on a free trial, and you will get 75 free credits with Prospeo, assuming that you sign up for a free trial. And then as soon as you click on this button inside of LinkedIn Sales Navigator where it's export with Prospeo, it will automatically redirect you into the Prospeo app, into your Prospeo account. You can give this a name and it will automatically start exporting over 2,500 leads from that list. More than that, you can also ask it to find you email addresses of all of these leads as well. So in my opinion, this is the best way to scrape LinkedIn Sales Navigator. However, alternatively, if for whatever reason you want some alternatives, there is also other tools like ICPs, and also we have other tools like Scrup, for instance, that can also scrape LinkedIn Sales Navigator for you. So I hope this was useful. In number 9, we have Trigify, and a lot of the time you may want to reach out to people that like or engage with someone else's posts, and Trigify is the best way to do that. So for example, you may find one of my LinkedIn posts and you may want to reach out to anyone that engaged with my posts in the past. So for that reason, inside of Trigify, you're able to basically filter for specific thought leaders and you can retarget their audiences. So if you're looking to do some retargeting of your competitors' followers, by all means, go check out Trigify. In number 10, we have Outscraper. For those of you that may not be aware, Outscraper basically enables you to scrape pretty much anything ranging from Amazon stores and Amazon reviews all the way to Google Maps locations, Google Play reviews, YouTube comments, TripAdvisor reviews, Trustpilot, anything of that sort. You can just head over to outscraper.com to see all the different options. The main thing that sets Outscraper apart from all the other tools like Phantom Buster and Apify is their pricing. So whenever you're considering one of these scraping tools, I would recommend just checking how much more or less it will cost you, which once again is something that you will naturally do. And that way you can compare the options and decide, whichever option is most affordable for you. Next up, tool number 11. If you've never done any sort of web scraping before and you want a confidence boost, go download the Instant Data Scraper Chrome extension. Let's imagine you go on my agency's website over here and you scroll all the way down to the testimonial section. Let's imagine for a second that you just want to pull the names of every single person that left a testimonial. All we would need to do is basically just click on the Instant Data Scraper Chrome extension, and it will basically pick up on all the information from the website. So this is one of the most powerful scraping tools. It's completely free for you to use. Whenever you are on a random website and you just want to extract some information, just click on the Instant Data Scraper Chrome extension, and it will automatically scrape all of that information for you. Tool number 12, we've got a whole section dedicated to it later on, so I don't want to spoil it too much. We have Clayagent, and Clayagent is Clay's AI web research enrichment, and it can basically mimic what you're already researching manually. So if you tell it to go and visit a Crunchbase page and then visit the Wikipedia page and then make a decision after visiting those two pages, it can basically not only visit and scrape and extract information, it can also make decisions on your behalf as well. And then finally, tool number 13, which is super, super useful. It's called Export Apollo. Once again, I have no affiliation with this tool, but what it enables you to do is to effortlessly scrape Apollo leads in minutes. So simply put, if you're spending $100 on Apollo, you probably could spend a tenth of that if you just use Export Apollo. We covered 13 different web scraping tools already, so let me just give you 3 quick tips for how to be effective with web scraping. The first thing that you should be doing is just going to the Unlock Clay GPT and giving it some context on the data that you want to extract, where you want to extract it from. You can even share screenshots of the website. On that basis, it will recommend to you 2 or 3 different scraping tools. You will evaluate these scraping tools based on price, based on functionality. You can exhaust some free trials to see the kind of data quality that's coming out of those web scraping tools. You can use my tutorial videos to help you learn all of these scrapers. However, it's worth noting that some of them may not be available on a free plan with Clay or a $149 plan with Clay, so just check that out for yourself. But essentially, as long as you don't need to share your own browsing cookies with a scraping tool, that's the first green flag. Secondly, you also want to make sure that the tool is affordable. And then thirdly, preferably, you want to make sure that you've watched a video from the Unlock Clay GPT to learn how to use it. And then fourthly, as a quick bonus tip for you, if you just want to get some discounts and you want to get some extended free trials, by all means, you can get those through the Unlock Clay GPT as well, and it will give you some free credits in some cases. In other cases, it will just extend your free trials for you. Smoothly moving on now to part 2, where I'll talk about how you can scrape company data. Specifically, this is every way that I could possibly think of about sourcing company lists in order for us to then be able to use that data inside of Clay tables. And luckily for you, there are only 15 different tools and methods that you should be aware of when you're choosing the right kind of data source. First of all, let's talk about Outscraper, which we talked about already. This tool is perfect for any sort of local business web scraping or brick and mortar business scraping. So simply put, if a business has a Google Maps location and you want to just scrape that business and you can find emails of decision makers in those businesses as well, you can just use Outscraper to do that. It's really affordable, really cheap. Moving on to tool number 2, we're going to be talking about Store Leads. Store Leads is a tool for e-commerce data. So if you're looking for specific Shopify stores, WooCommerce stores, or anything of that sort, Store Leads is the biggest database of e-commerce businesses. It also provides you with very niche things like technologies installed on a website, number of website visitors per month. Also, it gives you a bunch of other different breakdowns of when a specific technology was installed. So you can reach out to companies saying, oh, hey, I noticed you just took off DHL as like a plugin on your website. Once again, super cool tool. I've done like a 35-minute video on how to use Store Leads. And then moving on to tool number 3, we talked about this already. You could use Apollo, and then after that, you could use Export Apollo in order to scrape Apollo data for you. Once again, there are significant cost savings associated with that. So check out Export Apollo, once again, if you're interested. But moving on top of that, I'm going to skip Trigify because I believe Trigify is pivoting a lot of the time with different product releases. So for that reason, I can't guarantee you that at the time of you watching this video, they will have any sort of ways for you to actually monitor and build company lists. So for the time being, I'm skipping Trigify altogether. Same with Scrapely. I'm going to skip that part as well. But worth noting that if you're looking at any sort of custom lists being built for you, I recommend you to use Upwork. And on Upwork, you can hire a freelancer for anywhere ranging from like $30 to $50, maybe to $100, and ask it to go and scrape Crunchbase and PitchBook or Built With or those kind of databases. And 99% of the time, these freelancers already have access to these databases. You'll work out a lot cheaper than you getting access to Crunchbase or PitchBook or one of these expensive tools yourself. So just keep that in mind. If any of these subscriptions are really, really expensive, you can just put a task on Upwork, which will be done at a tenth of the price or at a fraction of the price. Moving on, we've got Smart Scout. Smart Scout is very similar to Store Leads, whereby it provides you with Amazon stores data rather than e-commerce data. Once again, if you're looking at super specific things like Amazon reviews or anything of that sort, or if you want to like filter for drop shipping stores or something of that sort, you can also do that using Smart Scout. Moving on, we talked about SerpDev already. Similarly to Outscraper, it can help you to scrape any sort of Google Maps locations. So if you're looking to pull up your entire total addressable markets of dental practices, for example, you would use SerpDev to scrape Google Maps locations for that. SerpDev is super cheap, as I mentioned before. However, it is only available on the $349 per month plan with Clay. So once again, SerpDev could be useful for some cases. For some other cases, it may not be so useful. So just check out the video that I made on it. All right, tool number 9. I don't need to introduce you to this one. LinkedIn Sales Navigator. You probably heard about it already. You maybe even watched my past video that I did about it, which I believe explains to you every single filter that you should be aware of inside of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Simply put, it's super, super good to source company lists and people lists. However, the limitation is you can only scrape 2,500 people per day. For that reason, you may need to get another tool to be able to scrape LinkedIn Sales Navigator for you without using your browsing cookies, because you can safely scrape probably 2,500 contacts or companies per day with Sales Navigator. But if you're looking to scrape any more than that, once again, I recommend you put out a job posting on Fiverr or Upwork, and someone will take you up on that. And I'm sure they can scrape tens of thousands of leads for you every single day if that's desired as well. All right, in number 10, we have PandaMatch, which is the best tool allegedly for discovering your full total addressable markets. They pride themselves on not just finding LinkedIn audiences, but also off-the-grid audiences. They may not be found on LinkedIn or Google Maps. You can watch a more in-depth video on their website. I've done a separate tutorial of how to use PandaMatch in the past as well. We typically use PandaMatch in cases where we want to filter for companies based on specific keywords. For instance, if we're looking for dental practices that offer Invisalign as a service, we can just type in the word Invisalign and dental practice as 2 keywords, and it will find us every single company that has both of these keywords on their website. So PandaMatch is really useful for that. I do believe them when they say that they help you discover your full total addressable market, and they offer 3x more coverage than LinkedIn and Google Maps. So I think PandaMatch is definitely worth having as a supplemental source of company data. So in other words, it may not be the main source of data, but it's good to supplement your existing company lists with PandaMatch's data. Moving on, we have DataRaid. DataRaid also provides you cheap Amazon store data. Once again, go check it out for yourself. It's very intuitive to use. In number 12, we have the Clay's inbuilt find companies enrichment. So the way that we can go about using it, I think I showed you earlier already, but in case if you're still wondering how to use it, if you log into your Clay account, it will look something like this. You can click on Find Companies, and over here you can filter based on headcount, revenue, if a company raised a specific amount of funding. You can also see if it's a private company, public company, and you can filter for any sort of companies here. However, the limitation, hopefully no one from Clay is watching this, but the real limitation with this is 30% or 20% of the data is rubbish. So you end up spending a lot of credits on email validation and all that stuff, because a lot of companies are either out of date or God knows when these companies were scraped and put into this database. So I would personally not rely on Clay's Find Companies feature, because it is free for a reason, right? I don't think it's the highest quality database. All right, number 13, let's talk about Ocean.io. For those of you that may not be aware, this is the most popular tool for lookalike audiences. And simply put, if you have an existing list of clients or existing customers, you may want to input them inside of this Ocean.io tool. For instance, you can input Nike.com and it will come up with lookalike company lists that are similar in the same industry with the same headcounts and the same geography. So for instance, if you put in Nike.com, it will come up with Adidas, Umbro, Under Armour, and so on. So for that reason, I think it's super, super powerful to find lookalike audiences and lookalike companies. So if you want to build a lookalike list of accounts, by all means, check out ocean.io. I know they offer some free trials as well. To top it all off, we have Company Enrich. Company Enrich is super, super useful inside of clay.com because it helps you save a lot of clay credits, something that we'll talk about later on in this crash course. However, for the time being, all we need to know is this is a very similar tool to ocean.io. It helps you to find company lookalikes as well. So if you don't want to break the bank and if you want to save a bit more money on company lookalikes, I believe this costs half the price of ocean.io's data, and it basically provides you with very similar quality data. Let's talk about the different options that you have when it comes to sourcing people data or contact data in order to use that inside of your clay tables. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of options, and it's completely up to you which one of those options you think is appropriate for your business. Export Apollo, naturally, as I mentioned before, if you can't quite afford Apollo.io, you want to save a lot of money on that, you can basically scrape Apollo using Export Apollo. You can use this tool called Claygent inside of Clay. We talked about this already. Once again, Claygent is really, really good, but it is on the pricier side of things, so it may only be a good option if you have just tens or hundreds of leads rather than thousands of leads to find using this enrichment inside of Clay. And I'll show you how to do this. Moving on, inside of Clay, you also have their inbuilt find people enrichment. So for those of you that may not be aware, if we go into a completely new blank clay table, like you can see on my screen right now, all you can do is navigate to the top right-hand corner into actions, type in find people, and over here, you will always have the possibility to find people working at a company. If you just click on the enrichment, you can filter it similar to any other database, and the best part is that it's completely free. As I mentioned, with the find companies data inside of Clay, in my opinion, it's only 60 to 70% accurate. So for that reason, it does mean that you need to use some other databases and other supplementary data sources. So in other words, don't rely just on this data set on its own, because in my opinion, only 2/3 of it at most are actually valid and verified information. So needless to say, yes, you can build people lists using their free enrichments to find people, but I would just warn you to make sure that you use Claygent or ChatGPT to verify the information, because a lot of the time the employees would have left the company or moved on or something of that sort, because I find sometimes the data is somewhat outdated. Now I'm going to just walk you through two more different options, because I think otherwise it's a bit of an overkill. To start off, let's just talk about ocean.io. And as I mentioned earlier, how ocean.io has this lookalike companies feature, they have a lookalikes contacts feature as well. So let's say if you input my profile into ocean.io, you'll find you similar profiles of other founders of clay agencies as well. So for that reason, I very much recommend that you use ocean.io if you're looking to build a lookalike audience list. For example, you have one SDR and you want to find similar SDRs. Now, to be totally honest, based on the options that I just shared with you, those options will cover 99% of use cases for finding people data. If you're curious at all about some of the other options as well, you can always ask the custom GPT and it will come up with some answers based on your questions there. In the next section of the crash course, I'm going to show you how you can use one of the most powerful features inside of clay.com, which is known as Claygent. And simply put, you can tell AI to go and visit websites for you to mimic the exact manual steps that your sales team or your marketing team or that you take on a daily basis. As long as you can pin down what those manual steps are, AI can go visit the websites, make a bunch of decisions for you. It can extract that information and it can provide it to you all in return for a fraction of a cent. Now, a couple of years ago, you probably hired a virtual assistant or you would have hired a person to do this type of administrative work for you. But here, instead of going through the hassle of finding those freelancers and micromanaging and babysitting them in the process, all you need to do is learn a 5-step process of how you can prompt Claygent correctly to do these kinds of boring tasks for you. Now, there is a catch to this as well, and this comes with a small disclaimer, and that disclaimer is Claygent does not have access to your accounts or to logging into your accounts. So in other words, no, it does not know that you're connected to Jackie on LinkedIn, right? However, it can access any information that's public and that's open source on any website in the world, similarly to how you can access any of these websites without having to sign up for an account or logging in for an account behind a paywall, for example. I'm going to get you to do 5 different Claygent prompts in the next 10 minutes or so, just to show you how Claygent works. But before we can do this, let me just explain Claygent to you. Simply put, let's imagine that you've got a completely blank clay table and you click on the actions button in the top right-hand corner. You can type in Claygent, and over here is the beautiful AI web researcher that you can see I've pinned over here because I use it so often. All you need to do is just just click on Clayagent, and over here you're able to then generate the prompt. Before we jump into prompting Clayagent, we need to know these 6 things. The first thing that you need to know about prompting any form of AI inside of Clay is to define the input. Over here, you typically will say, hey, the input is this. And in other words, you want to tell it what data you already have in the Clay table so that Clayagent can use this as a good starting point. So in this case, I can say something like the input is the company name and the company website. One thing as well on top of that, we need to remember that Clayagent cannot read this information unless we map it into the prompt. So when we say that the input is the company name and the company website, we need to now feed it into Clayagent. So the way that we'll go about this is we'll just say their website equals the company name equals. And straight away, in order for us to map the website, we'll use the backslash to refer to it, and we'll feed it the website. And instead of the company name, we'll use the backslash company name as well. That's why we need to label these columns to perfection so that we don't have any sort of confusion when we're trying to map those variables. Now, secondly, we always want to define the action that we want Clayagent to take. So for example, we can say, based on the input, find me the company registration number for the company. Now, in this case, if you follow this structure, you will always prompt Clay correctly, so you cannot get this wrong. After that, you may want to constrain the output, and when we talk about constraining the output, we can say something like output just the company registration number, nothing else, keep it in numerical form with no other output. This is just an example, but a lot of the time you would need to tell Clayagent like, hey, don't use quotation marks in the output, only output this number, only output this text, don't say anything else, just so it doesn't ruin the output for us. A lot of the times, and I'll show you in a second how to go about this, you may need to provide a prefix for Clayagent. So if you want Clayagent to come up with a sentence output which follows your exact structure, for example, you want to tell me, for example, hey Tim, I saw you worked at Klarsha before, and Klarsha is the name of the company that I used to work for like 4 years ago. In that case, you will need to give it the prefix. Whenever you feed a prefix into Clayagent, I always recommend for you to say, follow my prefix in the output, here is my prefix, and over here you can say the company registration number is, as an example, always put this in quotation marks, and whatever thing has to change, so in this case we want the registration number to always be dynamically changing depending on the company that we're feeding it. In this case, you put this in curly brackets, and then you can say, replace the curly brackets with a company registration number. And then finally, it's always good to give examples. So for example, you could say, oh, if the company registration number is 12345, then say, in quotation marks, the company registration number is 12345. So that's an important example for us to be making. And then finally, after you prompt it once, you can just click on save and don't run, and just click play to run one row before seeing if it actually works. A lot of the time you would need to change the prompt a tiny bit before it works out correctly for you. Oh, that sounds rather complicated. In theory, I understand how to use it, but in practice, how do I actually learn how to use Clayagent correctly? In the next part of the video, I'll be encouraging you to download this Google spreadsheet, which you can find down below underneath the video, and this will be specifically called the Clayagent and OpenAI assignment. Follow along. All you would need to do is just download it as a file, click on File, Download CSV, and then inside of Clay, all you basically will have to do is just click on Import CSV over here. You'll just basically drag and drop the file over here, click on Continue, click on New Blank Table, click on Complete Import. As soon as you have a Clay table that looks something like this, what I want you to do is to follow along with the task that I'm about to show you. I'm going to show you how we can find the name of a person that left a testimonial on b2bboosted.com. So if I just show you on our website right now, if you go to my agency's website, at the very bottom, we have a bunch of different testimonials from a bunch of different clients. And what we're going to do is we're going to get Clayagent to find one of these people's names and just pull it for you from the website. So this will just show you one little use case of what Clay can do for you. So in this case, I'm going to click on Actions, and then of course, I'm going to type in Clayagent over here as the enrichment. So let's just click on Clayagent. Now, right now, you're probably thinking, okay, cool, but how do I actually do this aside from just remembering these 6 key rules for speaking to AI? In my opinion, it's super, super simple. What I want you to do right now is to copy and paste the text that you can see on my screen right now. You can pause the video for a second and just copy and paste it directly into the prompt. So this will read, based on the input, I want you to, and then over here, we can tweak the prompt. You will give it an example and you will constrain the output. So let's just copy and paste it here. And let's also remember what we're trying to do in the first prompt. In the first example over here, we want to find the name of a person that left a testimonial on B2B Boosted's website. So let's just follow the exact structure of the prompts that we talked about over here. So the first thing we need to do is we need to write down the input. So we'll say, and once again, pause the video right now and try to do this yourself. And then if not, we can do this together. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to say the input is the company website. Naturally, afterwards, we're going to say the website equals, and then we can just give it the website name. And then we'll say, based on the input, I want you to, and then over here, we'll say to visit the website and find the full name of one person that left a testimonial on the website. Of course, over here, it tells us to give an example. So we'll say, for example, if Bill Gates left a testimonial, I'll put Bill Gates. Now, of course, as a next step, we also want to constrain the output. So in order for us to constrain the output, we can say something like, only output the full name of a person that's left a testimonial and nothing else. So over here, naturally, we just write down, only output the full name of a person that left a testimonial and nothing else. And that's pretty much that. That's how we will find the name of a person that left a testimonial on the website. We gave it the input, we constrained it, we provided an example. And all we need to do now is click on this generate button. Now, for those of you that may not be aware, I'm just going to click on this and it will take like 30 seconds to load, but that generate button helps us to improve our prompt. Worth noting that for 99% of the Claygen requests, depending on if you're watching this in 2025 or 2050, of course, this may change. But most of the time, Clay is trying to rip us off and it's trying to get us to use the neon enrichment, which will cost us 2 Clay credits. But rather, because I'm an absolute pro at this and I've done this a million times before, I know that GPT 4.0 mini is going to give us the exact same output and we can just change it to our own API keys, which once again, I'll show you how to do later on. But for the time being, always be conscious of what AI model Clay suggests for you. 99% of the time, just switch it to 4.0 mini because it will do the job properly. And now you can just save and don't run. And bearing in mind, if we go back to the task, the first task is that we want to find the name of a person who left a testimonial on the website. So all we need to do is now click into this box for B2B Boosted's website, click on play, and within 30 seconds or so, it should be able to find the full name of one person that left a testimonial on our website. Claygen just found us the first testimonial from the B2B Boosted website. So over here, we see Celine Daniel. And if we actually go on the website over here, we should be able to see that Celine wrote us a really, really nice testimonial, which I believe is over here as the first testimonial on our website as it is. So congrats! If you followed along and if you downloaded this Google Sheet and if you tried to find a testimonial on our website, congrats because you did it correctly. Next up, let's move on to task number 2 for prompting Claygen. And what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to just copy and paste the task into the prompt, and then we can just do it for ourselves over here. So if we just click on that and click on... So for this one, all we're going to do is click on actions again, type in Claygen, and into the Claygen prompt over here, I'm going to copy and paste what we want to be doing. So we want to find the full name of the head of human resources for the main Coca-Cola company. Now, of course, in this case, I want to map these 2 columns as well. I don't want to just give it all as a prompt over here. So once again, we'll follow the 5-step process. The first step, what is the input? The input is the company name and website. So by now, we just clarified what the input is. The second step will be defining the action that we want to be happening here. So we'll say, based on the input, search the internet for the head of HR at the main, and then we'll select company name and how long they have been in the role for. In this case, we will do something really fancy and we will say output 2 things, the full name of the head of HR, how long they have been in the role for. Now, the reason that we are doing this is quite simple, and the actual reason is because we want to then use that data to personalize our outreach. So over here, you can see that we've loaded up the prompt. All we need to do now is just click on generate. It will take about 10, 20, maybe 30 seconds for the prompt to be generated by Clay for us. It doesn't cost us any credits to actually generate the actual prompt, so you can experiment with this as much as you want. Over here, we can see that the whole prompt was generated for us. One thing to keep in mind is that at the bottom of the prompt, you can see that it added multiple outputs. So you'll have one output for full name, one for the time and role. But if you want to add other outputs as well, for example, you could add reasoning. And in this case, AI will provide a separate text outputs for reasoning as well. So in this case, I'm actually going to keep it this time, just so that we can use the reasoning later down the line. I believe it still will suggest Argon to us, which is the most expensive model, which will cost us 3 Clay credits. Once again, I back myself, so I'm going to select the 4.0 mini. I'm going to click on save and don't run, because if we remember what the task was, we want to find the full name of just the head of human resources at the main Coca-Cola company. We don't care about all the other businesses here. So how do we just focus on one row at a time? We're just going to click on Coca-Cola Company, and we're going to click on play over here. And within just a couple of seconds, we should be able to find the full name of their head of HR and the time that they spent in their role. So let's just give it a couple of seconds to think and output this for us. You can see over here, it just outputs Lisa Chang, and it shows that she's been in the role for 4 years and 11 months. And this is perfect. This is exactly what we were craving here, and we got the exact output that we wanted. Now, on top of that, in this case, if we wanted to just double check this as well, we could add a separate output here, and we could just ask for LinkedIn profile URL of the person as an example, and we can change this text field to a URL, and this way we can save and don't run, and then once again we can replay the output here, so that in order for us to manually just cross-check that this web scraping was done correctly, we can actually see the LinkedIn profile of the person as well. So I'm just doing that just to show to you how you can iterate the prompt and how you can change that prompt and spice it up a bit more so that it's more useful and it's helps you to manually verify the data faster next time as well. And at the bottom over here, we can see that it's now outputted the LinkedIn profile URL. You can see the cost of this. In this case, it did cost us almost 2 cents, just under 2 cents to do this. But once again, most of the time you wouldn't be scraping that much information about a person, and it is quite expensive to scrape every single detail about every single contact, but it's a good skill to get into. So if we click on add as a column here, we can create the column, and voila, over here we have Lisa's LinkedIn profile, which I will blur right now, but you can see over here that this is Lisa. You can see the job title is EVP and Global Chief People Officer, and she is a part of the board of directors for Coca-Cola as well. So clearly you found the right person, and we used Claygen to pull this off. So congrats for making it this far already. I'm sure you're absolutely smashing it with 2 Claygen enrichments completed up to this point. And now it's time to move on to enrichment number 3, which we're going to pull off with Claygen, which will enable us to find job listings for an SDR position at Salesforce, and it will enable us to just pull some information from that job description as well. So all we're going to do, as always, is click on Actions, type in Claygen, and in this case, I'm just going to copy and paste what we want to be doing here, and I'll explain it to you in super simple context. So if you pause the screen for the time being and you try to prompt Claygen yourself, that will be probably the best way for you to learn Claygen. But in the meantime, I'm just going to show you my thinking behind this. As always, I'll just say that the input is the company name and website. Then I'll give it a company name equals website equals. I'll use the backslash to select the exact website and the exact company name. Guess what we need to do next? Yes, that's right. By now you probably would have learned this. We need to say, based on this info, I want you to, and then over here we can just basically write down in simple terms what we wanted to do. So in this case, we're going to say, I want you to find a sales-related open role job listing and pull the exact technologies that are mentioned inside the job description for that open role. Provide 2 outputs, the open role job listing URL and the technologies that were listed in the job description for that role in a comma separated format. Now, just to show you what kind of information we want to be pulling and extracting and scraping using Claygen here, if we go over here and we look at any of the jobs that Salesforce is hiring for right now, if we click on the job, in most job descriptions at the very bottom, we will have some sort of technologies that the candidate must know how to use. So in this case, if we're looking at a technical role, it will be JavaScript, Java, HTML5, SQL, and so on. But obviously, sales roles, the chances are we're probably looking at technologies like Apollo, Clay, Salesforce, or anything of that sort as well. We're just going to give it a quick example as well. We're going to say, for example, if the job description mentions the candidate needing to use Apollo and Salesforce, output Apollo Salesforce. And now we need to constrain the output, which is step number 5. And of course, how do we constrain the output? We will just say, give just 2 outputs strictly with the info I mentioned. Now, in this case, it basically will be regenerated either way by Clay itself. So if we click on this generate button, it will work its magic in the background and it will create a killer prompt for us. So now you can see that the prompt has been generated for us. It asks for 2 outputs, the job listing URL and the technologies that I mentioned in the job description. As always, it tries to upsell us to the Neon model, so we spend more Clay credits. Naturally, we just have to remember to every time switch this to 4.0 mini. Now I'm going to click on save and don't run. And as soon as I do that, all I'm going to do is just click on the Salesforce row over here, and I'm going to load this enrichment to start running so that we can pull and extract all this information straight away directly from all of these open role lists so that we can just run this enrichment and get the result. As we can see on my screen right now, it has loaded the output. In this case, it's loaded this specific open role on the Salesforce careers page for sales development representative. Unfortunately, though, if you do read this job description manually, it doesn't actually include any sort of technologies listed there apart from Salesforce, which is quite depressing, but still, in this case, Clayagent scrapes Salesforce as a sales tool that should be used as a part of the job description. We've covered 3 Clayagent prompts already, and we're just 2 prompts away from turning you into an absolute Clayagent prompting pro. So, assuming you are equally as pumped to get better at using Clayagent, all you need to do is copy and paste this exact text, which says we want to find the square footage of this place, and let's go into Clay, click on Actions, type in Clayagent, and let's select the Clayagent enrichment and copy and paste this exact string of text. So essentially, as always, in this case, we want to understand what data do we already have inside of the Clay table. We have the company name and we have the website. And what we basically want to do is we want to just find the square footage of Lidl's specific store. And then we want to find the person that handles the store operations for the UK for this company called Lidl. For those of you that may not be aware, Lidl is a super affordable yet high quality retail chain, like a retail grocery chain based in the UK. By the way, that was not sponsored by Lidl in any way, shape, or form. So in this case, I've just finished off drafting this prompt. So here I'm saying the input is the company name. I give it the company name. I say that I want to find the square footage of Lidl's Tottenham Court Road store, and I want to find the full name of a person that handles store operations for the company. I wanted to create 3 outputs. The first one is the square footage of the store. The second one is the full name of the store operations person. And the third thing is the LinkedIn profile of that person as well. Now, for context, the only reason I'm asking for the LinkedIn profile is because I just want to quickly manually check that it's the right person so that I don't make a mistake when it comes to finding those decision makers. And of course, for the time being, I'm just going to click on generate for the prompt to load. But in the meantime, the reason that I'm showing you this specific use case of finding the square footage of a place is simply because you can get Clayagent to do any random thing that you typically do manually. So if for whatever reason I'm trying to sell to store operations managers and I've got this new location and I want to figure out what the typical square footage of a retail outlet is, once again, we could probably find that out by getting Clayagent to visit a bunch of websites and figure that out for us. I very much recommend for you to one day just sit down and read the context, the objective, the instructions that are provided to Clayagent and everything of that sort, just so you understand like the longer format of how people prompt Clayagent. But 99% of the time, you would not need to put yourself through the pain and misery of just writing a 500-word prompt over here, because you can see it's written for you. In this case, I'm just changing the store operations LinkedIn URL's profile to a URL, so it's a URL format. And of course, I'm going to change Clay's Argon to GPT 4.0 mini. As soon as I do that, I'm going to click on save and don't run, because I can't afford to run 5 rows as a part of this crash course, simply because it's a free crash course, right? And it's going to cost me like $20 to just record this video, taking into account the cost of all of these Clay credits here. So over here, I'm just going to click on the Lidl row over here and then just click play. In the meantime, it will now start loading the store size, the operations person's LinkedIn profile, and their full name, which we will use in just a second from now. It's just loaded within 15 seconds or so. You can see over here, if we click on response, we can see all the different outputs. Worth noting that Clayagent also provides you with a confidence ranking as well. So typically you can just tell it to only output if the confidence is high. Over here, we can see the full name of the store operations person. We can see the square footage of a location of this specific retail outlet, and then more than that, we have the LinkedIn profile of this person that I believe should be working in store operations. And over here, in fact, it pulled out the director of operations at Lidl GB. So hopefully you can see that on my screen right now, that it's a good profile. And also the person went to University of Leeds, which is a fun fact that I bet you didn't expect to be learning inside of this crash course. So just to give you another example of how you could be using Clayagent, in this case, I want to find out the net worth of the founder of Amazon, aka Jeff Bezos, and also I want to find his zodiac sign. In this case, I'm just going to hide all the other tabs on my screen in the meantime, and then I'm just going to prompt Clayagent in order to find us the zodiac sign. And no, this is not what I was expecting to say casually at 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning. So essentially what we're doing here is we're clicking on actions again. We're typing in Clayagent as per usual. After selecting the Clayagent enrichment, we're basically just copying and pasting the task so we remember what it is. It's time for me to show you how I go about prompting this. Feel free to pause your screen right now and I'm going to just draft my prompt over here. So here we are. You can see that I've just typed in the prompt. I said that the input is the company name and website. I'm just basically using the backslash to refer to both of these, company name and website. And I've basically asked it to find me the net worth of the company's owner in USD, also find their zodiac sign, and I want this in 2 separate outputs. Over here, as always, we're going to switch to 4.0 mini, and you can see all of this looks good. The main thing to check at the bottom is that there is the net worth value in USD, and then there is the zodiac sign. Those are the 2 things that we care about. We're going to click on save and don't run. And bearing in mind that we're doing this just for Amazon, so we're just going to click play on this Amazon row over here. And let's see how fast Clayagent can get us the output. So you can see straight away, Clayagent picked up on the response here. It only cost us 0.001, so it's a tenth of a cent to do this research. Net worth is over $230 billion according to Clayagent, and the zodiac sign is a Capricorn. Capricorn, did I pronounce that correctly? Comment down below if I can't pronounce words. This exact presentation that I've been sharing throughout this video, you can get it underneath in the description down below, so make sure to go and grab it in your own time. And moving on, we'll now be talking about how you can use AI inside of Clay, specifically for other OpenAI and Claude enrichments, which do not require Clayagent, but rather just require the OpenAI content creation enrichment. So we'll be talking about that in just a second. Time to talk about how to use OpenAI and the content creation enrichment inside of Clay.com so that you can not only just use Clayagent all the time, but also you can use OpenAI and the generate text enrichment inside of Clay for a lot of the lighter tasks, which will cost you even less Clay credits in the process. Now, for those of you that may not be aware, if you're looking at my screen right now, if you go into the top right hand corner and click on actions or enrichments or whatever button is located in the top right corner on your screen right now, you can type in OpenAI over here into the search. Typically, you'll come up with this use AI enrichment, and for the purpose of what we're going to talk about right now, if we click on the configure part over here, you would see that there are 3 main types of AI that we'll be using inside of Clay.com. So we already talked about web research and the Clayagent capabilities of being able to access information from the internet, scrape and analyze websites and pull that information back to you. And now we'll be talking about the most common use case of AI inside of Clay.com, which is the creating or modification of content, is useful for most tasks which do not require AI to be connected to the internet. So if we click on that, we should be able to see that it's the exact same setup, and you can also just generate a prompt over here before then clicking on generate and getting Clay to generate the entire prompt for us. If you're a total beginner to Clay, you may ask, okay, but explain this OpenAI enrichment in a bit more detail. You can give a bunch of information to AI. AI can analyze and interpret that information for you. It can qualify data. It can help you personalize outreach. It can create some sort of messaging for you, or it can make a decision, for example, to determine if this company fits your ideal client profile based on a specific criteria, or if it doesn't fit your ideal client profile. You may ask, why is it cool? Why is it useful? Why would you bother using the OpenAI enrichment here? And simply put, you can just create one simple prompt and it will spare you through the hassle of manually reviewing company data or people data to make a decision. So a lot of the time, if you're looking to qualify leads, qualify companies, or do something of that sort, it's really, really useful for those kind of tasks. Every single enrichment should come with a disclaimer. In this case, I just want to remind you that this enrichment does not have access to the internet. So the only information that OpenAI and this enrichment can interpret is the information that you type in over here into the prompt section. That's why if you're feeding it any information from other columns, you should be feeding in that information using the backslash. Otherwise, it will only use the information that you provide to it without even trying to access the internet for you. As I mentioned already, there are 2 most common use cases for this enrichment. First of all, it's the qualification of leads and companies for your product or service. And then secondly, it's generating personalized one-liners for outreach. One thing to keep in mind, never get OpenAI to generate an entire email for you, because that's when it sounds super robotic, but rather just get AI to generate strings of text no longer than 12 words at a time, because in those cases, it's less likely to hallucinate and it's a lot more likely to give you solid output. Now it's about time that we put the theory into practice and we start using the OpenAI enrichment inside of Clay in order to help us with some of the prompting, following on from some of the work that we've done previously using Clayagent. Now, if you remember, the first step of using Clayagent was to pull the name of a person that left a testimonial on the B2B Boosted website. In this case, we have Celine Daniel over here. And right now we will use the OpenAI enrichment in order to generate a sentence that looks something like this, where we can reach out to someone at B2B Boosted and say, hey, I saw this person's review on your website and it felt rude not to reach out. We can click on actions, we can type in use AI, it will come up over here, and then over here all we need to do is just copy and paste the prompt. Now, worth noting that over here you're going to apply the exact 6 key rules for speaking to AI that we talked about earlier. So the first thing will be to define the input. And in this case, I'm just going to say the input is the name of the person that left a testimonial. And then I'll just say full stop. And then I'll say the input equals, and then we'll use the backslash to refer to the name of the person that left a testimonial. So testimonial author name. And secondly, if we look at the slide over here, we're now going to define the action. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to say, based on the input, I want you to put the person's name into a sentence for me. Now, in this case, we talked about prefixes earlier, so this will be the first time that we can practice using prefixes. In this case, we're going to say the output should follow my prefix. Here is my prefix. And then in quotation marks, we can put I saw, and then we'll import the name of the person that left the testimonial review on your website and it felt rude not to reach out. Of course, we can give it examples. Of course, we can constrain the output as well. But for the time being, I think this will give us a solid enough answer. So all I'm going to do now is click on generate. You'll be able to generate this exact output for us. So after the entire prompt is generated for us, we can just click on save and then run. And then we can just play it out for this one row over here. As always, I very much recommend that you click on the column, you rename it. And then in this case, I'm just going to say step 2, generate sentence opener. And in this case, you can see that it just came up with this. I saw Celine Daniel's review on your website and it felt rude to not reach out. Now, this is the first option of how we could have gone about doing this. The second option of how we could have used this Clasion output would be to click on add column, click on message over here and say, I saw, and then we'll just use that person's review on your website, and it felt rude to not reach out. Inside of Clay, there are multiple different ways that you can pull this off, but essentially, if you are ever looking to draft an email based on just one of these custom variables and just a specific bracket, all you need to do is click on add column, click on message, and over here you can write a message referencing all of the other column headers if you want to put that message together. So the idea behind this is for me to just show you how this can be done. There are different options, as always, completely up to you which one you choose, but you just need to be aware that there is more than one way that you can pull off most of these things inside of Clay already. You made it to challenge number 2 when it comes to prompting OpenAI. And over here, I want to ask you, do you remember that prompt that we generated for Clayagent to find the head of human resources for Coca-Cola? And yes, it's this exact output that we're looking at, where we have Lisa Chang, we have the LinkedIn profile URL, we have the time and role and all of this fun stuff. We're now going to create a sentence that will follow this exact format here, where we're going to say, hey, I saw you've been in the role for this amount of time, and I can see that you're leading the HR team over at Coca-Cola. So the way we'll go about this is we'll click on actions again, we'll type in ChatGPT, and over here, we can select the generate text enrichment. As you can see on my screen right now, here is the prompt that I came up with. I said that the input is the time that a person has spent in their role. I gave it the input. I said for AI to generate a sentence that sounds conversational following my prefix. And here is my prefix. I saw that you've been in the role for time and years rounded up to the nearest year. And I can see that you're leading the HR team over at Coca-Cola. I even went as far as to say, replace the curly brackets. So the time and years rounded up to the nearest year, the input itself, because we know that the person's been in the role for 4 years and 6 months, but it will be really cringe if we say, hey, I saw you've been in the role for 4 years, 6 months and 3 days. We don't want to say that. So for that reason, I said at the bottom over here, replace the curly brackets with a time and role, making sure that it fits grammatically nicely into the sentence. And then you can say, output the sentence, making sure that it sounds conversational and nothing else. And when I say nothing else, I just don't want it to hallucinate and come up with any sort of other outputs. So I just basically asked it to output the sentence that way. And in the meantime, I've clicked on generate, and now it's just generating the entire prompt in order for us to be able to send out this one-liner. You can see the prompt has been generated. We're now going to switch the model to 4.1 mini, and then we're going to click on save and don't run. And now we'll just run it for this specific enrichment. As always, since that was step 3, I'm now going to label this step 4. You can see within just a couple of seconds, it's generated this sentence for us. I saw you have been in the role for 5 years, and I can see that you're leading the HR team over at Coca-Cola, which is the perfect email opener that I wanted AI to generate. Of course, alternatively, I can click on add column instead, click on message, and I could just not use any Clay credits here. However, given that the output here is 4 years and 6 months, it's not really going to sound too conversational here. Okay, so that wraps up OpenAI prompt number 2. Let's move on to prompt number 3. And in this case over here, we're going to be qualifying a company to see if it fits our ideal client profile. This is a very common use case inside of Clay.com, something that we'll be covering later on in the crash course as well. But for the time being, I just wanted to show you the thinking behind how we go about qualifying companies to see if they fit our ICP or not. So first of all, we need to write down the ICP criteria. In other words, what kind of companies do you want to work with? What kind of companies you don't want to work with? So for instance, in this case, let's say we want to only work with companies that have under 50 employees. Let's say we want these companies to be based out of the UK, and we want the companies to have a B2B business model. And for the purpose of this one, we're going to be using the B2B boosted row over here as the example inside of the Clay table. So we've got B2B boosted over here. We have the company website and the company name, and we want to qualify them on the basis of these 3 ICP screening criteria. So how do we go about that? First of all, we need to write down every single one of those qualifying criteria. And then secondly, we need to understand what enrichment we need to use in order to find that information about the company. Luckily for us here, we killed 2 birds with 1 stone here by using the enrich company enrichment in order to find the company headcount and the country of where the company is based out of. We can then use collegians to find out the business model, and then we can use the OpenAI enrichment in order to qualify the company one final time. So let me show you how we will go about doing this. In the meantime, if you back yourself, if you're feeling confident, feel free to pause the video, try this out for yourself, try to qualify the company on the basis of it being under 50 employees based out of the UK and having a B2B business model. First of all, we decided that we're going to start with the enrich company enrichment, as you can see. So what we're going to do is inside of our Clay table, we'll click on actions in the top right-hand corner, we'll type in enrich company, and voila, right underneath over here, we should be able to find any of these enrich company enrichments. I'm going to choose the Lead Magic one because this is the OG, the original enrichment that I've been using for the last 2 years. So it feels rude to not be using it here. And in this case, I'm going to switch the toggle on to see the employee count. I'm going to also switch on the toggle to see the country over here for the location of the company. But worry not, if we don't switch on some of these toggle filters, we would still be able to see them in outputs later. So I'm now going to click on Save and Don't Run. And with a click of a button here, if I just click it on the B2B boosted row, it should be able to straight away output the industry, the employee count, and the country. So in this case, we can see the country is GB, so the United Kingdom. That's good for us. And we can see the employee count is 7, which is under 50 employees. Now let's have a look at the 2 criteria that we already ticked off. We ticked off the company headcount. We ticked off the country of the company. Now we need to figure out what the business model is for the business. So the way that we'll go about doing this is, first of all, we'll keep things tidy. So we will rename this column and we'll call this step 1, enrich company, to find headcount and location of business. And then secondly, we'll now be using Clagent in order to determine whether the company is a B2B or B2C company. So the way we'll do that is we can go into Clagent, click on the AI Web Researcher, and then over here, we can be super simple and just say, tell me if this company is B2B or B2C, or the exact abbreviation of their business model. And in this case, we can click on generate. But before that, you saw that as well. I forgot to give it the actual company. So the company, and now I'm just going to click on generate, because typically when you put minimal amounts of details into this, especially for simpler prompts like this one, it should basically be absolutely fine, in my opinion. So here we are. As always, we need to change the model from Argon to 4.0 Mini, and this tip alone would probably save you about $100 every other month inside of Clay if you're using the OpenAI enrichment aggressively. Yeah, so now we're going to just click play over here to see what the business model is for the business. Now we're going to rename the column and just say step 2, see business model. If we click on the response over here, we should be able to see that it says business model is B2B. We can click on add as column, create column. And up to this point, we've done a great job already because we managed to tick off those 4 things. So we found the company headcounts, the country of the company, the business model. And now it's just time to use the OpenAI enrichment in order to qualify the company. Now, in my opinion, I'm just going to show you a fancier way to qualify the company without using the OpenAI enrichment. To start with, we'll click on add column and we can click on formula. When we do that, we can say output ICP. If we'll use the backslash to refer to business model, and then we'll find wherever the business model is, and we'll say basically output ICP if the business model is B2B, and then we will select headcount. The employee count is under 50, and what was the third criteria? Let's just refresh our memory. And the country of the company is UK or GB. And the country over here is GB or UK or England. But this is just like broadly speaking, because, you know, if you're running like hundreds of rows, that could be the case. And then we can now click on generate formula, and we should be able to see on the right over here, it now outputs ICP if all three of these conditions are met. Now we can click on output is correct, save formula, just tap ourselves on the back for being patient enough to go through like 4 enrichments to figure this out. And in case if you're feeling a bit more lazy, in case if formulas are a bit scary, which they are sometimes for beginners, you can always click on actions. You can always just type in ChatGPT and use the OpenAI enrichment over here where it says generate text. And you can say something like say ICP, but you will basically be copying and pasting this exact prompt over here to determine if the company fits your ideal client profile or not. And you could do a similar thing with people data as well to qualify people for your services, but that's basically that. It's time to briefly cover how you can write better cold emails than 90% of salespeople out there. I'm just going to show you a quick hack of how we go about personalizing emails, having sent over 500,000 emails per month on behalf of our clients over at our agency, which is called B2B Boosted. And essentially all it takes is the 3 steps that I listed on this slide here. First of all, we need to feed a bunch of information about your company into a GPT. Now, if you don't have the time to create your own GPT, which you can then train on copywriting and all that fun stuff, then just use our Unlock Clay GPT. It's really, really good. All you need to do is click on new chat over here. And as soon as you have a new chat, you can just upload a bunch of documents over here by clicking on plus and adding the files here. You can dictate some voice messages to it to explain what your business does, or you can type it out. So in my case, I'm going to type out something like, I'm basically saying that I'm selling a CRM for home businesses. I want to pitch it as it's cheaper than alternatives. Find me some good cost-saving email templates and give me a 5-email sequence. So to get started with, assuming that you upload some more information, it can even create you great personalized emails on top of that. But as a starting point, it typically is really, really good at generating some email templates, which 100% stand out in the leads inbox. Take this one, for example. First name, you're at a vending machine. You see 3 cans. $0, $1, and $1.50. Which one are you picking? And then over here, you could put something like, oh, probably like the $0 one, right? Because it's like a free can of soda drink. Then why keep paying your current CRM $100 a month when our hours cost $49 and does the same job? Crazy to think about that, right? Let's pause for a second. I'm not saying this is the best cold email template out there, but what I'm saying is, this is the exact email template that we sent out for this business over here, selling this CRM to plumbers, and we're getting a lot of positive replies. And guess what? The best part is if you still have not opted in for the resource that's linked underneath this crash course, then what are you doing with your life? You literally have access to over 20 different cold emails. They got replies over here. You can read them for yourself. You can get some inspiration behind what hooks, what opening lines, what kind of template structure actually works. And the best part, this GPT is trained on all of this fun stuff, and it doesn't cost you a penny, assuming that you already have a ChatGPT account. So, to answer that question about how you will go about writing better cold emails than 90% of salespeople, just start with a GPT. Not only would it provide you with the email templates, it will also provide you with some triggers, some hooks for those emails. It'll give you some ideas of how you can improve the emails on top of that. And on top of that, as soon as you generated those templates, you may need to add some dynamic variables, some personalizations. And this is something that's custom. I would recommend you to think, if you could go and manually research each prospect, each company every single time, how would you go about doing that? For example, if you're selling Google Ads, you will probably go to this company and say, hey, I noticed you have the Facebook pixel installed on your website, and I can see that you've spent this amount of money on your ads in the last 3 months. And I'll tell you what, you can do all of this using the ad beat enrichment inside of clay.com in order to generate those kind of stats that you can pull about the Google ad spend and everything of that sort. But what I want to emphasize here is that all of this is 100% doable. You can use the custom GPT. You can automatically generate the email templates, the triggers, the ideas, everything of that sort. It will be up to you to add some personalizations. You do have these 20 cold emails that got positive replies in 2025 for us over the last 1 month alone. And the best part, I'm even giving away over 30, yes, you heard that correct, 30 opening lines that you can cold email anyone with, including the exact example of how you would use that opening line, the enrichment that you need to use, the prompt, and if you want to spend even more time watching my videos, over here, if you click on that, guess what? it opens up a Loom video showing you how you would go about setting up that enrichment completely from scratch. And you can see this one, for instance, got viewed by 23 people, and I've only just uploaded this to the Unlock Clay community, which is the course that I run for people that want to learn Clay completely from start to finish. It only costs £100. Not going to talk about it too much. I'm sure you see enough value in this crash course already, and you'll become a Clay pro in no time. So let's move on. It's about time that we now talk about the fastest and cheapest way to hyper-personalize every single cold outreach message at scale inside of clay.com without going broke in the process of doing that. Because there are a lot of tools that will cost you a lot of money to do that. But in this part of the crash course, I'm just going to show you how I would go about personalizing emails at scale on a budget pretty fast. First of all, let's just remind you what the typical process of using Clay for cold outreach is. As I mentioned a million times before, you typically would think of what a super personalized email looks like. You would write it, including the curly brackets. You, after that, will understand the kind of steps that you need to take in order to find those brackets and those dynamic variables. You'll understand the enrichment. You'll have to find the prompt. However, the depressing part behind this is typically in a Clay table, you will have to pull off anywhere from 10 to 20 different enrichments in order to just simply write one personalized email. And it's about time that we change that. And I'm now going to show to you the new method that I've just discovered 3 weeks ago in order to be able to write any personalized email using just 2 prompts. And this will cost you 1 cent per lead that you're emailing. This is maybe my favorite part of this crash course because I'm going to get you to follow along and to join me in when building out this Clay table completely from scratch. And in this one, I'm going to show you how we can go about sending a personalized email in order to reach out to every new enroll employee in our ICP target companies. And the idea behind this, of course, in case if you're wondering, apart from this being an educational workflow, the logic behind this is when someone is new in the role, they're likely considering different services and products that will make their life easier. For instance, when I came into my sales role 3 years back in a market research company out of London, I did not have any CRM in place. I didn't have any tools in place, and I was open to pretty much any cold email that I received in order to decide what tech stack I needed to flourish in my sales role. In this one, we're going to go through the following 7-step process. We're going to first of all find companies, then find people, figure out how to write a personalized cold email for them. We'll find the email of the person. And then after that, we'll basically use my 2-step copywriting framework inside of Clay in order for us to pull off this personalized email in just 2 quick enrichment steps. By now, you should know how to do that, but spoiler alert, if you log into your Clay account, you should see Find Companies right in front of you over here. Alternatively, if you click on New and you click on Workbook, we can title this workbook as we wish. And in this case, I'm now going to click on Add at the bottom over here, going to click on Blank Table. And the reason I do it this way is because I really like to label the tables to perfection to start with, so that I start off doing the small, tiny details correctly because they add up here. So I'm going to give this table a name. I'm going to type in Table 1, Companies. And inside of this table, you can just type in Find Companies and filter for whatever companies that fit your ideal client profile. In my case, I'm just going to select advertising agencies. I believe there will be a ton of them, so I'm not going to select any other type of businesses. And I'm going to look for any advertising agencies with less than 50 employees. Simply put, I'm just going to select based on company sizes. And I'm going to make sure that the location is anywhere in the United Kingdom. Of course, you can spend some more time building out these filters, but remember, we're going to be going after new enroll employees of these companies. So after we're done with applying the filters, we can click on Continue and import to existing table and just select the table that we've just created. So let's click on Select Table over here. All right, so we have a list of 34,000 companies over here. The first thing that I recommend you to do is to click on the company, and to the bottom over here where it says the LinkedIn URL, that's clearly the company LinkedIn URL. Just rename it to company LinkedIn URL and creates that as a column. Now, looking back at what we should be doing now, we found the companies, we have them in a Clay table. Next up, we need to find people that are new enroll working at these companies. The way that we'll pull this off, I'm sure you could teach me this already because you've been watching this for a while now. You can click on Actions in the top right-hand corner, type in Find People. Don't get mistaken with other paid enrichments. You don't want to be scammed by this 7 credit Clay enrichment and go absolutely broke. So let's click on Find People here, completely for free. We can type in the job title over here for the kind of folks that we want to be selling to. So remember, these are the new enroll employees that we want to reach out to. In this case, I'm just going to talk to marketing, product, operations, design, software engineer, any random title. The reason for this is that we're going to be pitching to them co-working spaces, so we can literally sell co-working spaces to pretty much any job title out there. So straight away, you can see it came up with 10,000 people. And if we scroll to the bottom, if we go to the experience page, you can see the months and current role. So I'm going to keep it as a minimum at 0 and as a maximum at 6 months, because I expect people to need a co-working space, especially in the first 6 months of tenure at a company. So let's wait for this to load. We can see that it's loaded 682 people that fit our search criteria. More than that, we can filter based on location to make sure that they're not located in, somewhere abroad. But we can see 539 people. Also, on top of that, you can limit the number of people that you want to be reaching out to per company. I'm going to also limit this at 100 people because I don't want to be spending too many Clay credits throughout this demo. Straight away, we can see the people list over here. We're going to now click on continue and import to new table. That new table will be inside of the same existing Clay workbook. You should expect that this may hallucinate for about 20 to 30 seconds because it just needs to think about where to add all of this data. And as soon as it's ready, it will populate this into a Clay table, as you can see on my screen right now. Straight away, I'm clicking on the toggle over here. It's a matter of habit here. So now I'm just clicking on the toggle, clicking on rename, typing in table 2 people. Bearing in mind that all of these people are new in role, so really important. What we can do now is we can click on run column and click on run all 100 rows that haven't run or have errors. This will basically synchronize all the data from the previous company's table, so we have access to all of this data inside of table 2. It doesn't cost us any Clay credits. If we click on edit column here, it doesn't talk about any credit consumption, so don't be too worried about that. But what we've done so far is we've created a full list of people that are new in role working at these companies. I would expect that you have paused the video and you wrote out your entire personalized email. Or alternatively, if you want to copy and paste this exact email template and follow along what I'm doing here as well, feel free to do that just to get some reps in and practice as well. So next up, what I'm going to do is use my secret GPT, which you can see over here. And all I need to do is input a personalized email and we will help you figure out how to generate that email for you. So the way we'll go about this is quite simple. We're going to copy this entire email template, as you can see on my screen right now. And we're going to just copy and paste it straight into my secret GPT. First of all, if you're unsure and you want to watch like a 10-minute video of me explaining this GPT to you, there will be a separate link over here to do that. But in the meantime, it will just give you an output, which is a Clayagent research prompt. All I want you to do is just copy this prompt, go into Clay, click on Actions, type in Clayagent, and just click on Clayagent AI Web Researcher, copy and paste the prompt. Only thing that you really need to do is just make sure that Clayagent has the right inputs, because it knows what it needs to do. It knows that it needs to research all of these curly brackets and all of these dynamic variables. If you can do that, then I guarantee you this is going to work really well. So what we're going to do after this is now we're going to click on generate, and this will instantly improve the prompt that we have created over here. Within 30 seconds or so, Clayagent generated this super long prompt for us. And all we now need to do is just change the model to 4.0 mini. And now we're going to click on save and run 10 rows. Now, let me just explain something real quick. If you don't back yourself with this, if you're just getting started, just click on save and don't run, and then just click into the row to run one row at a time. In my case, I'd like to think that this prompt is correct. I back myself 100%, and I'd rather just back myself with this one. You can then click on the response, and over here you could see all the different variables. So it has the first name, the colleague name, the past company name, the type of companies, and how many months the person has spent in the role. If we just click on rename column, we can then say step 1, research the person, because essentially what we would have done otherwise inside of Clay is we would have used like 5 different enrichments in order to research the person, and it would have just taken up a long time to do that. In this case, you can see so far we only spend 0.002, so it's a fifth of a cent that we spent in order to research 6 things about a person. Now think how long that will take you manually to research the name of a colleague, the name of the company where this person came from, the type of company that it is, and the standout products that you just scraped from their website. That will take you forever. So with this prompt alone, it's saving you a lot of time. We've done the first part, and over here, if we go back to the secret GPT, it tells you this. Just tell me yes when you're ready, and I'll send over the cold email prompt so you can generate the entire cold email for yourself. So I'm now going to type in yes over here, and within 10 seconds or so, this GPT will create one prompt that you can copy and paste. So in this case, we're now going to go into the clay table, click on actions. Well, we've got use AI over here, hopefully starred for us. So over here, we'll go into use AI. We'll make sure that the use case is create or modify content. We can play around with different models over here. I would start with Claude 3 Opus. Now, as you can see, I copied and pasted this Claude cold email prompt directly from the secret GPT. I mapped out all of the dynamic variables over here. And now I'm just going to give it some tips that I think are important in order to make this email sound better for us. So in this case, I'm just going to say, make sure that the names of companies that I mention in this email sound conversational, e.g., Apple rather than Apple Inc. or Apple Ltd. And then secondly, because I can see that we're calling out the number of months that someone's been in the role, I'm going to say if someone has been in the role for more than 6 months, round up their tenure to the nearest higher year, e.g. 7 months becomes 1 year. So now we can scroll up to the top of the prompt over here. We've got a pretty good prompt. We can actually go into the configure page and just copy and paste it there instead. Make sure that we select the create or modify content bit because we don't want it to visit any websites. We want to change the model over to Claude 3 Opus. And before we submit the prompt, we can also switch off these toggles. This will mean that all of these variables are not mandatory. They're not required in order to run the enrichment, because otherwise we will get an error like we can see over here where it says some inputs missing. So now I'm going to click on save and don't run and just click on play into a random row inside of the clay table. So here we are. Let's have a look at what the email came up with. Hi Daisy, I noticed you joined just 2 months ago from BBD Perfect Storm, and I was curious, have you and Jason already found an office in London to work from? Asking as I run Teamwork, where we help similar brand and cultural transformation companies to access affordable co-workings without paying a monthly recurring fee. If I could get you a 2-day free pass to test out in the next month, would you take me up on that? P.S. Bet Jason would love the idea of doing some face-to-face work, especially as you work on growing creative thinking to accelerate business growth. Yes, I agree. The PS line is cringe, AI-generated, and robotic. But guess what? We can just go back and we can tweak this template. I would just say, make sure the PS line sounds casual and conversational. And now we can save and don't run again and just replay this row inside of the clay table. So now if we click into it, we can see Bet Jason would love the idea of doing some face-to-face work, especially as you work on growing your creative thinking solutions. Once again, it's not so conversational, but if you prompt it enough times, if you're banging your head against this clay table for like 3 more iterations of this prompt, I guarantee you'll get there. So let's just call this step 2, generate email. And now we can just play this out for the rest of the leads. And we can see that for each individual, for instance, for Melissa here, it customizes the location. So it doesn't just say London every single time. It says Portsmouth in this case. And the PS line in this case is not as cringe and as robotic as in the previous emails. So it does get better. And now all we need to do is click on actions in the top right corner, type in work email. This is the part where I can show you how you can set up an email waterfall. So you can click on work email over here. You can see that the inputs are the full name, the company domain, the LinkedIn profile, and the company name. And then if you click on full configuration, you will see every single email provider that's a part of the waterfall. In my opinion, this is not the most optimal waterfall because if I'm totally honest with you, this is one thing that probably no one will tell you. The reality is you can get rid probably of most of them because all of these providers are a part of Better Contact. So what's the point of using clay credits from 6 different providers? You might as well just get one provider, which is Better Contact. All we want to do is just basically move whatever provider you want first, then second, then third. And then at the bottom here, make sure that the validation provider, just make sure that you connect your API key to it. And I'll show you in the next section of this crash course about how you can go about doing this. I personally have a Lead Magic subscription. For that reason, I'm putting that in. But if you're spending a clay credit on email validation, you're an idiot. So all I'm going to do now is I'm click on save and run 10 rows and hope and pray that at least 7 out of these 10 emails get found, because otherwise, what's the point of an email waterfall if it cannot even find you that many emails? Okay, we can see that already in just 30 seconds or so, 6 out of the 10 people's emails were found using Better Contact. So they're still being validated right now, and they're going through this tedious process of just like being validated and everything of that sort. So for the time being, I'll close this tab. I'll just keep it open for work email. I'm now going to click on filters over here and click on add filter. I'm now going to type in work email over here, and I'll make sure that the work email is not empty, because this will mean that in front of us, we can only see the leads that already have an email address verified. That's typically what I would do to make sure that I don't run random enrichments later down the line. And then over here, we can also click on the play button because this person has not had an email generated for them. All right, let's recap what we've done so far. So we found the companies, we found people that are new enrolled in these companies. We fed the entire email to the GPT in order to generate that personalized email inside of Clay. We found the email address of the leads. We now may want to consider writing fallback copy. Now, let me explain something to you. Right now, with these filters, these are the people for who we could write this email. Sometimes you may not be able to write the email because a lot of these variables are missing, and you cannot say anything using these curly brackets or dynamic variables. In which case, we can click on add column, click on message, and just generate a message from scratch. I showed you this before. You could just go, hi, first name, how are you, right? That kind of thing. And then after that, as just like a really high-level example, we will see that this email is generated for each individual. That's your alternative as well, if for whatever reason you're not able to generate the email that you want to generate, which happens to the best of us. In that case, just click on add column, click on message, and you can do that for yourself as well. However, the last step is just to add the lead into a campaign. Let me show you how it's done. We'll now click on actions. I personally recommend for you guys to use Smart Lead. And now I'm going to click on add lead to campaign over here. So all I did was in the enrichments, I typed in the enrichment that I wanted, Smart Lead. You can see add lead to campaign, and you can select the campaign ID. In my case, I can put it into like this random test campaign. I can add the work email, the first name, the last name. And of course, the only thing that I need in order to add the lead into this campaign is the custom field. So if I click on add a new custom field and custom field value pair, I can just call this email 1. And then over here, I can select email 1 response. And basically this response, it's basically this column that we've just generated the email with. And now I can click on save and run 5 rows. And it would be successful. However, I reached my lead credit limit, preventing me from further lead imports, which is very depressing. Just shows to what limits we push Smart Lead. Assuming that you added all of these fields, especially the custom field, you should be able to add the lead to a campaign. This is the process that we go through in order to send personalized emails at scale. And in the next section, we'll be talking about why and how you can save Clay credits. Now, let me present you with the facts. 1 Clay credit costs anywhere from 3 cents up to 4 cents inside of Clay. However, if you buy that exact data directly from the provider, you will be spending 5 to 6 times less money, and this is the arbitrage that Clay makes a lot of its revenue from. In fact, that's why Clay just recently introduced this 0.1 Clay credit charge for using external HTTP API providers, which you don't need to worry about because Clay experts and all the agencies flooded Clay's customer support with complaints, and Clay cancelled this random charge for using your own API keys and using your own external tools. Now, there are 10 main ways that you can go about saving Clay credits. The first thing is to start deduplicating data when it comes in. Now, as you can see on my screen over here, we have 2 people and it's duplicate contact. So, of course, we don't want to be wasting our enrichments on duplicate data. For that reason, make sure that you always click on the settings icon at the bottom of the screen. Make sure to click on auto dedupe rows. Switch that toggle on and select a column. So in this case, the full name, and you can click on save changes. And that means that for any future data coming in, that data will always be automatically deduplicated. So let's have a look. Now, if you have any existing data right now that needs deduplication, just click on the column header, click on dedupe, and then just select all the duplicate rows and delete the duplicate rows. And then you can click on delete. And now we should be able to see, if I am to try and add Tim Tam into this table once again, it will not let me do that, and it automatically deletes it simply because our auto deduplication is enabled at the bottom of the table over here. Now, the second method for saving Clay credits is all about switching off auto run inside of Clay tables. Needless to say, Clay runs from left to right, meaning that obviously this is the first step runs first, then the second step, then the third step. However, if we want to prevent the entire Clay table from running automatically every single time that we change one of these fields over here, what we can do is click on edit column, scroll to the very bottom, and make sure that auto update over here is switched off. So this will mean that this enrichment will never run unless we click for it to run over here. So that's called auto update. And the way that we'll go about using this is we'll make sure that this toggle is switched off at the very bottom. And whenever we are happy with the clay table, we test it out a couple of rows, we can then switch this toggle to be back on. Moving on, tip number 3 for saving clay credits. What we need to make sure we always do is we click on the settings icon at the bottom of the page, and we can select auto update to be off. So we can then switch that toggle off and click turn off table. This will apply to every single enrichment inside of the table. So if I click on save changes now, you should be able to see that every single enrichment now will not be running because the entire table is turned off. Now, the 4th tip for saving clay credits, make sure that you replace the OpenAI enrichment with your own API key. That means that whenever you go into the use AI enrichment over here, and let's say you click on GPT 4.0 mini, you can click on manage accounts, and over here you can click on add connection, add your API key, and name that API key as well. If that sounds too complicated, don't worry, because I've got a guide that walks you through about every single one of those hacks that I'm talking about today, and it's got an instructional video in case if you're still wondering how to actually find your API key from OpenAI or how to set it up inside of clay.com. Now, tip number 5 is all about how you can enrich people and how you can scrape their LinkedIn profiles without spending any clay credits. So if you look over here and if you type in enrich person, you would see that this costs you 1 clay credit per row in order to scrape all the information from the LinkedIn profile of the person. However, you would notice that there are a lot of enrichments, for example, Prospio, where it can find the work email and enrich the person from the LinkedIn profile, and you could do that using their API key as well. So I would recommend for any of you that are wondering what tools to get, I very much advise you to get Prospio because it will replace a lot of random enrichments that you didn't know that you needed. And if I just click over here and click on continue to add fields and save and just run 1 row to show you an example of the data that it can output, if we click into this one, we can see that you can scrape literally the entire LinkedIn profiles the person worked at, education, time in role, absolutely everything of that sort. Even provides you an email sometimes, and the company description and the location and everything. In my opinion, Prospio is a no-brainer. It's one of those all-in-one tools that I wish I had from day one so that I don't spend too many credits on enriching people from LinkedIn URL. Tip number 6. This one is very straightforward. I showed this to you before, but every single time inside of Clay, the chances are you'll probably be using the enrich company enrichment. And in this case, it will cost you anywhere from 1 credit up to 2 credits. If you literally type in the enrich company enrichment, you can go and have a look which one of these has the most affordable pricing package for you and just go and buy it directly. Because in my opinion, if I run this across 100 rows, I would be spending 100 credits. And this way I'll burn through 10,000 credits really, really fast. I believe now we're moving on to tip number 7, which is replacing email validation. I very much recommend that you just go and get one of these providers to validate emails for you, because these providers directly will cost you 1/10 of the price of you spending a clay credit every single time. And imagine if for every single one of these leads, there are 100 leads in the table and you're spending 1 clay credit on every single enrichment, and you've got 10 enrichments, you already burned through 1,000 credits just through 1 clay table of 100 people. So you don't want to be doing that. And if you're on the $349 per month plan, I'm going to show you this absolutely insane email validation tool, which I found on AppSumo. It gives you a lifetime access, meaning that you just have to pay once $79, and then it gives you 100,000 email validations, and every single day for the rest of your lifetime, you get 500 free email validations. Now, tip number 8, if you want to scrape built with PitchBook, Crunchbase, or anything of that sort, go check out my video on how to use Zenrose. If you want that kind of random information scraped from company websites, I would very much recommend that you try out Zenrose. It's a super good scraping tool. Once again, no affiliation with them, but that's personally one of the tools that I spend the most money on right now. So for that reason, I just thought it's worth mentioning that here as well. And that's that. I mean, I can go on and on and on and give you 20 other tips for how you can save clay credits, but the reality is it just depends on what you're spending clay credits on already. So if I were you, in the first month, just spend some money on the clay plan, whether it's $149, $349, however much you choose to spend. Figure out which enrichments you're using the most. Figure out the provider that you can use to replace that enrichment. And if you ever lost for ideas of what specific provider to choose from, once again, I've got this super cool guide, which will show you how you can save a bunch of clay credits, which I'll be linking inside of the course notes. And you should be able to see that it will be hyperlinked over here where it says 10 ways to save clay credits inside of Clay. So all you need to do is click on that and it will redirect you straight into the guide. In this section, I'll be talking about every way that you can monetize your clay.com skills, having learned all of this fun Clay stuff already. In my opinion, there are 4 main options. The first option that you have is to start your own business, which is super, super obvious. Typically, to start with, you would probably start as a freelancer or as a fractional consultant. You will naturally start finding a couple of clients. A lot of the time, one of the main benefits of using a fractional consultant or a freelancer is because you're going to be way cheaper than any sort of agency out there that implements Clay. And for that reason, a lot of people will take you up on that, especially some of the smaller companies that are sub 20 employees who are a bit more price conscious, for example. Now, there is also a natural progression from being a freelancer and having 3 or 4 clients. And before you know it, you will probably grow your client base pretty fast, and you may need to hire some more people to help you out. Before you know it, you will probably be running a Clay agency similar to myself right now. But I do think that starting off as a freelancer and just seeing where it goes is the first option that you have. And obviously, the biggest benefit of doing that is you're your own boss. You manage your own time. Sometimes, yes, you may work on weekends or you may work past your bedtime. But the chances are it's very, very rewarding. And in my opinion, the upside reward of managing 5 or 6 clients at the same time and making double of what you earn in like a 9-to-5 role in most cases, I think it's definitely worth taking the risk. However, of course, some of the challenges will be that it's very hard to acquire your first 2 or 3 clients when you have very little social proof. It does require a lot of improvisation, and every single Clay agency owner will tell you this, because Clay is new, AI is new. A lot of the time, we have no idea what the hell we're doing, but we need to improvise and we need to make sure that we're on top of things. Now, another challenge that you may come across as a freelancer or even as a Clay agency owner is the fact that the fixed costs for the cost of tools are fairly expensive. So typically you will be spending anywhere from $800, maybe up to $2,000 a month when it comes to your cost of tools. So I would recommend that you consider passing the cost of tools directly to your clients, because otherwise you don't want to wake up on the first of every single month knowing that you're $1,000 in the red. Overall, in my opinion, it's 100% worthwhile to try yourself as a Clay freelancer or as a fractional consultant and just see where it goes. No pressure at all. The chances are you may have a Clay agency on the back of that, or you may just be working 30-hour weeks instead of 60-hour weeks. You may be making a lot more money than you're currently making right now. Now, the second option here is to become a go-to-market engineer. In this specific case, I'm going to point out that here I'm talking about you becoming a go-to-market engineer at a startup, a scale-up, or maybe a corporate firm, but not an agency, because in my opinion, the agency space is completely different, and this will be covered as a separate career option later down the line as well. So first of all, what the hell is a go-to-market engineer? Quite frankly, not many companies that are hiring for go-to-market engineers can even answer that question, but simply put, you are in charge of implementing all of these fancy email deliverability, inbound and outbound lead generation systems. You're probably speaking to your sales team. You're trying to look for inefficiencies within the existing processes. You're automating that activity, and you're trying to replace a lot of the stuff that is done manually using AI, using tools like Clay. It is helpful for you to have knowledge of other tools like NA10, Make.com, Zapier, or something of that sort. But realistically, I would say that 50% of the job is reliant on you being good at using Clay, and the rest of it is just being able to know how to scrape data and just think on your feet when it comes to putting all of these tools together in order to build some workflows. Now, let me start this time by talking about the challenges when it comes to finding full-time go-to-market engineer roles at some of these scale-ups and startups. And the first challenge is that a lot of the time, the expectations are super blurry. What I mean by that is I've seen tens of companies hire go-to-market engineers, and when you read their job descriptions, they're basically an SDR with a paid Clay account rather than being actually trained and set up for success by their employer. So I think the expectations are something that are super, super important to map out with a company that you're interviewing for. And also I heard a lot of stories of it just being a super competitive space, and it's super, super hard to land interviews. So a lot of the GTM engineers that I know that have been placed at good companies up to this point, they have actually gone outbound and they started prospecting and calling up these companies that are hiring for roles, demonstrating that skill set, that initiative, that use of Clay in order to find the emails and to find all of that fun research about the companies. And basically that way, that's how I know a couple of folks that landed some good interviews with some bigger companies. Simply because it's still early days for the go-to-market engineer roles, there are very limited roles in the market. So I recommend for you to just keep an eye out on those roles on platforms like LinkedIn. And also in some separate videos, I show you how you can actually automatically be notified of new job listings inside of Clay. It's super simple to set up. I don't have the time to go into it for now. But if you want to stay on top of every single LinkedIn job listing for go-to-market engineer, just direct message me on LinkedIn and I can send you a video across of how you could pull that off yourself as well. Now, one final challenge. If you're not based out of Europe or the US, there does seem to be a bit of a bias and there are not as many job listings in foreign countries for go-to-market engineering roles, which in my opinion just means that in that case, it may be a matter of trying one of the other career options as a go-to-market engineer, working for an agency maybe, and only then after you build a bit of a reputation, having a go at getting a GTM engineer full-time for one of those scale-ups or startups, because most of these are in person and they don't accept remote candidates. Now let's talk about option number 3, and this option is about how you can be working for a clay agency, otherwise known as a claygency. If you want to have a look at all the clay agencies, you can simply go to clay.com/experts and you should be able to see every single verified clay agency out there. I believe there are only 100 of them or so, including my own business, B2B Boosted, and I assure you, if you message every single founder of every single one of those agencies, you will get one unpaid internship or even one paid opportunity to build some clay tables from one of these agencies, and that's how you get your foot in the door. And if you have the right work ethic, you're guaranteed to land a gig in one of those companies. And in my opinion, working for clay agency is rewarding overall because typically you get compensated in proportion to the amount of work that you do. So simply put, if you take on like 10 clients, you will probably be paid more than if you take on 5 clients, because there tends to be some sort of element of commission to the role that you fulfill. However, as I pointed out just now, it's 100% worth it to work in an operations role first before trying to get a go-to-market engineering role at a clay agency, because these roles are super complicated. You probably will work longer hours. It will be a lot more stressful as well, because when you're managing requests from 10 different clients to change clay tables, to tweak campaign copy and do all of that stuff, it's a lot of multitasking. So if you don't have the best stress tolerance out there, maybe don't consider this option in the first place. Some other obvious drawbacks about working for a clay agency is the fact that there is a lower pay than some of these scale-up startups and corporates, because some clay agencies just want to pay you commission only without a base salary. In some clay agencies, you will have high staff turnover rate. Another thing to keep in mind with agency work is the fact that it's chaotic 99% of the time. And the fourth option, which is not so obvious but worth pointing out, there is always that route that you can take about educating people about clay.com and teaching them how to use clay. For instance, on my side, I block off 5 hours a week to do one-on-one private consultations with people, teaching them how to use clay. I also have a course that teaches you how to go from beginner to an intermediate level at clay.com. And there are a lot of people that do this full time, whereby they jump on calls, they teach companies how to implement clay, they educate them about what clay actually is and so on. However, in my opinion, this is not a worthwhile option to consider until you make a career out of being either a go-to-market engineer, maybe you run your own clay agency or do something of that sort. But it's just worth knowing that this is another little income stream if you choose to pursue that at some point later on in your career. That's basically all the different options that you have when it comes to monetizing your clay skills. It's up to you what you want to choose to do, of course. And if you have any questions about running a clay agency or something of that sort, feel free to message me on LinkedIn. I do have over 80, 90 messages in my inbox most of the time, but I do get to every single message when I have the time to. So just make sure to drop a message, say hi, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll be more than happy to answer any of your questions. That brings us to the end of the course. But now that you know the basics, the logical next step is to get some clay use cases under your belt. And you have a few options here. One is to try figure things out yourself or sift through Clay's internal education on their website. Or you could click right here to check out the next video where I show you 8 of the best use cases for Clay.com that you can use in your own business to get better results or offer to other businesses to make your services even higher value. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.